I now call the meeting of the Committee for Communities to order. This is the first meeting of our 24-25 session. So can I remind everyone in the public gallery that mobile phones must be turned off. Mobile tablet devices, however, can be used through a Wi-Fi connection, and all devices should be muted. Password details are available in the gallery for anyone wishing to connect to the Assembly's Wi-Fi network, and no recordings or photographs to be taken, please. Can I remind members about the protocol regarding the use of electronic devices? Please switch all mobile devices to airplane mode and activate Wi-Fi connection. Please also use tablet devices discreetly in a way which does not interfere with proceedings, and be aware of the cameras when using your tablet device. I would also like to remind you once again about the sensitivity of the microphones. And finally, members, I would remind members of your responsibility to declare any interest in any of the items under discussion today. Do any members have any interest to declare in relation to today's item? Sian, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm a recipient of an ILGOS pension, and also I am the chair of the all-party group on arts, and was employed in the arts sector.
Thank you, Sian. Andy?
Yeah, private rented sector landlord, chair and charity trustee.
Yeah, thank you.
Likewise, I'm a beneficiary of an ILGOS pension. Well, not yet, but in the future I will be.
Okay, thank you. Melissa?
I'm in the same.
Okay, thank you.
With pensions as well.
And I will also declare a member of a charitable trust, a charity organisation, and a owner of a private rented property.
ILGOS as well, please, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone. So, apologies then, Clerk. Apologies for today's meeting.
Daniel Crossan.
Yeah, an apology from Daniel, thank you. So, members then, in terms of Chairperson's business, a few items I just want to touch very briefly on. The first of which is in relation to the very sad loss by our committee member, Daniel McCrossan, of his mum. And I just would like, on behalf of the committee, to extend our condolences to Daniel and his family, and let him know they're in our thoughts at this sad time, and also to anyone who, over the past period of time, has lost loved ones or family members. Thank you. In terms of just to touch on the winter fuel payments, there has been much reporting and discussion on this in recent days, and I know committee will certainly have a keen interest. Committee will still need to be given our place in terms of that scrutiny, despite the circumstances of it. And we are scheduled to consider the associated SL1 and hear from departmental officials later in this morning's meeting, so to let members know that. I also want to note the publication of the Grenfell Inquiry Report, a very significant report, I have to say. It is an event that was quite shocking in its scale and also potential for how much it drew attention to the need for good safety measures across all our residential properties, and that's something that I know committee will be wanting to keep an eye on in terms of the department's plans around safety issues. Linked to that, the electrical safety event on Monday, and I think Kelly, you sponsored that event, around the importance of proper regulation and the key role for committee in looking out for forthcoming changes and improvements. And I think, I know we had a very good presentation here previously. I think it would be worthwhile at some point to schedule in an update in terms of that safety issue, to see how that issue is unfolding. I also wanted to acknowledge just the fact that the Air Ambulance NI has been nominated as the official charity of the Assembly here, more broadly. I have to say that our own family has had occasion recently when a niece was injured, and the Air Ambulance was out with her very, very quickly and very professionally. So I think particularly in rural areas, I think we all recognise the value and the worth of the Air Ambulance. So I'd like to just encourage members to keep in touch with that as the year goes on. There was a reception for Michael Dunlop here to mark his achievement sale in Man TT, and I had been invited to that by the Minister. I wasn't able to get up to the reception while it was ongoing, but I did get an opportunity to speak to Michael up in the Long Gallery immediately following, and to acknowledge his achievement. And then last, but by no means least at all, I would like to put on record huge congratulations and thanks to all of our Olympians and Paralympians who brought, I think, so much joy and credit to us over the summer months, and I hope there will be opportunities for the committee to engage with them further and in person in the forthcoming months. And I think I really noticed over the summer some of the young ones in our family, nieces and nephews, out setting up hurdles and things, and in the garden, and them hardly fit to lift them. But it just shows you that if you can see it, you can be it, and the impact of having those sports people there is really of value to us as a society and a community. So thanks for that, members. Moving on then to agenda item 3, and I'm conscious that we do have a very, very heavy agenda today given the summer recess. So I'd refer members to the draft minutes from the meeting on 27th of June, which are page 7 of your meeting pack. Are members content to agree the minutes of 27th June as drafted?
Agreed.
Yeah, thank you, members. Moving on then to matters arising. So we do have a substantial number of issues that we need to deal with received over the summer recess. As there are so many items, I don't intend to go through each one in turn, but you have all been provided with a matters arising memo, which sets out a brief summary of each item and is organised by topic or theme. So that commences at page 16 of your pack. The memo details in parts where there are several replies on the same issue or topic, and I intend to group these and ask if members have any comments in relation to each topic. If members are content with this approach, I will commence with the set of replies to committee correspondence in relation to supports being provided to curers. So members content, thank you. So that reply starts at page 33 and includes the following documents. There's a reply from the Welsh Government, reply from the Department of Social Protection, departmental reply, DWP, Department of Work and Pensions reply, and a reply from the Department of Health in the South. That's at page 46. So do members have any comments or content to note those? Content. Thank you, members. So then moving on to the ministerial reply and a reply from the Secretary of State in relation to Casement Park at pages 49 and 51. Do members have any comments or wish any, or are members content to note? Content to note? Yeah, thank you. Members provided with the following replies in relation to the Commissioner for Older Persons report on preparations for an ageing population. So there's a reply from the Department of Agriculture and Rural Affairs, reply from the Department of Finance, a reply from the Department for Infrastructure, Department for Communities, Department of Education, and a reply from the Department of Health. Members, any comments or content to note? Content? Thanks, members. Then, members, following the briefing by Renters' Voice, you will recall we wrote to Council seeking information on reports made to environmental health in relation to private rented sector housing over the last 5 years, with details on tenure type, action taken, and response time for action. The replies, along with the departmental reply, are varying in scale or detail and are set out at pages 79 to 779 of the pack. Do members have any comments in relation to that, or are they content to note? Go ahead.
Well, just to comment, I obviously appreciate the work that each of the councils did. It was quite difficult to kind of review, given the different mechanisms of reporting. But just even and looking at the first few, like Fermanagh and Omagh, and you're talking 400 a year, Derry 250 a year, so you do that across councils of that balls on average. It's a high scale. Now, I did notice in going through them, although it was difficult to analyse, one of the key issues was those that were called out, they weren't registered. And obviously the council then worked closely with them to have them registered. But it seems to be a big issue. And it's just that for landlord registration, there's a key area of work that needs to be done. And I'm just thinking, is it something that the department and the minister is looking at? We need to ensure that our private landlords are registered. But that was something that I noticed across all the council areas. And likewise, I appreciate, and I have to obviously acknowledge the work of environmental health within the council areas, because a lot of the work is done informally rather than formally, which is great. We're not there. We're there to support and provide an enabling role, so it's just to acknowledge that as well. But it is a key issue, and it's just what can be done to ensure private landlords are aware of the registration process and are enabled to go on it, rather than it has to be an issue. And it's probably with local councillors and ourselves that are identifying it through individuals who come to our office. Can they look at that to see what can be done?
suggest we write to the department to ask for further information?
Yeah.
Update, so a letter to the department in terms of what is being done to ensure that private landlords are going through the registration process.
Yes.
Yeah, members content? Thank you. Members, then, following the briefing by Electrical Safety First before summer recess, the committee forwarded that briefing to a range of authorities seeking information and response. You have been provided with the following replies then. So the HSE NI is at page 782. There's a response from NIHE, the Housing Executive, Department for Communities, Federation of Housing, NIFHA, and the Utility Regulator at page 793. So do members have any comments in relation to any of those, or content to note? Content to note, thank you, members. Then you've been provided with a reply from the Housing Executive at page 794 in relation to housing disruption faced by successful asylum seekers. Do members have any comments, or are you content to note? I just do want to make a comment that continues to be an issue. I think there was recent reports this week about a child travelling to Newry for schooling purposes, so I think that's something that we will want to keep an eye on, as you know, with the Home Office involvement in that scheme. So just it is an issue of some concern. Members, then, you have been provided with a reply from Fermanagh and Omagh District Council at page 797, and that's in relation to committee queries on local government remote meeting regulations. Do members have any comments, or are they content to note? Content, thanks, members. Then at page 798, there's a reply from the department in relating to the Scottish model for a mortgage rescue scheme. Members, any comments or content to note in relation to that? Content to note, thank you. At page 804, there's a departmental reply in relation to the committee's request to be provided with regular updates on the introduction of a discretionary waiver facility for individuals in receipt of a welfare supplementary payment. Members, any comments in relation to that? Sian?
Yeah, it would just be good to get maybe an eligibility for the waiver, just to understand more just about, I suppose, the process there, and really how will the department ensure that both tenants, that the people will, or they're adequately informed about any waiver or any potential for a waiver.
Okay. Yep, members content with that? Any other comment or content then otherwise to note? Yep, thank you. Members, you have been provided with a departmental reply at page 806 in relation to the Universal Credit Contingency Fund. Do members have any comment, or are you content to note? Go ahead, Sian.
The Chair, just on an update, before the recess, the Minister had obviously talked about renaming this fund, and it would just be good to get an update on the engagement that he's had with those in the sector on the renaming of that fund. And then also, I think that there is going to be a real pressure put on the contingency fund, and my worry is that when we get to the running out of that, what's next, what contingency plans are put in place if that budget falls short, just because it is obviously such a vital lifeline for those who need it. So I suppose just then, what are the contingency plans, and then how will the department address any potential delays in the dual application process as well that was mentioned in that report, or in that reply?
Yeah, and I think actually a related issue there is one that I'm picking up an awful lot on now at the present time, is around the issue of farmers and other self-employed people with seasonal income, and that's so I think it would be worthwhile maybe asking for an update on how that process is working out, how many people are encountering difficulties or struggling with, or have the department any plans or any ability to influence how that operates, to take into account the fact that not everyone earns a set amount each month. Members content with that then? Thank you. So, members, at page 808 then, there's a departmental reply in relation to gambling legislation. So, any comments in relation to that, members?
Just through the Chair, it's disappointing that, and I accept, that there's going to be a major piece of work in terms of bringing forward legislation, we'll say, in relation to gambling. But again, given the disease that as it is and how it exists within all of our communities, I think it's important that we should keep this sort of like on the radar all the time, and that hopefully that eventually they will be coming forward with legislation in relation to it. But in the meantime too, I often wonder whether or not there are other initiatives maybe that can be taken, and particularly in relation to, we'll say, people who, as a result of, we'll say, the addiction to gambling, experience ill health and the likes of it as well.
Sorry.
I was going to say, if in the future we're bringing forward the APG on gambling to give us, it might be worthwhile if we invited Ofcom from Northern Ireland to come in and talk to us about the online, the changes to online that will affect online gambling, or if it affects online gambling. You know, that new piece of legislation that's come through Westminster.
Yeah.
Because in the legislation that we did before, we couldn't touch online gambling at that stage because we were waiting for that information. So it might be worthwhile if at the same time as the APG and gambling's coming, if we could invite Ofcom.
We got a response from Ofcom previously, so I can recirculate that. It may be another agency, CMA, possibly, not Ofcom.
I thought from memory, and I had met with Ofcom as well.
They said they didn't have a role, but I will dig that out and identify the correct agency.
Right, okay.
And does committee wish to have them alongside when we identify a spot for the APG?
Well, I
Or
suppose if it's
separately?
relevant, and if it's relevant and useful, if it's going to be a
Well,
kind of a
that's the
dead rubber, I think we'd have to establish first maybe who's the most appropriate person, but
Yeah.
certainly that is an issue that appears to be a bit of a black hole that we need to look at who is regulating and how effective that is. So
Just with that online safety happening in Westminster, as Malaysia has said, you know, we need to think about the online safety, especially for people that have an illness, a gambling addiction.
absolutely, I think it's an issue of huge concern, and I would be concerned that there's not a clear enough line of accountability.
I
Ciara?
suppose one of the questions, and we worked on the code of practice in the last mandate, and I welcome, and when I was reading it last night, obviously the kind of key areas prohibiting land-based gambling to accept credit cards, ATM machines outside the location of them, the age limit is highlighted inside and outside the areas, the age verification text and the customer self-exclusion scheme. They're really, really welcome. I would love to know the baseline of the gambling industry here at this moment in time, the land-based gambling industry, adhering to the rules already. You know, what's the baseline? What are we looking at to ensure if and when the code of practice is published, it's already been happening anyway. And where's the gaps? Where's the gaps? Are they identifying the gaps? So when it comes to promoting it and enabling land-based gambling agencies to follow the code of practice, you know, what is the scale we're looking at? Because that will then have to be resourced. There's no point having a code of practice if it's not resourced in some way, and where does it really need to be targeted at as well. So I would like to know, has there been much work done on that, research on that?
Content?
Yeah.
Clerk with the,
Yeah.
and members content?
Yeah.
Brian, go ahead.
I see the Minister says that the work on the codes of practice is ongoing, and the Department will be happy to provide the Committee with copies of initial proposed sets of the codes of practice once the Minister's opportunity to review. So if it's going to come up that we're getting presentations from one of our meetings, if we can let the Minister and the Department know that date, and if we can see those initial proposed sets of code of practice, I don't know if they are available immediately. It says he has to review them first.
Yeah.
So if we give them as much notice as possible of when we will be considering that at a committee meeting, so we can get those.
Thank you. Members content with all of that? Yep. Thank you, members. Then at page 810, there's a departmental reply in relation to the intermediate rent scheme. Any comments in relation to that, members, or content to note? Content, thank you. Members then have been provided with a ministerial reply at page 812 in relating to the right to buy scheme. So members, any comments in relation to that? So I think that is something that continues to be a concern. I know the Minister has kind of indicated that that's not something he's looking at in general terms. He may have indicated that there may be specific. I do detect a sense that there may be further attention coming to this even from the incoming Labour government. It is hard to equate if you're only able to manage to build 400 homes and as many or more going out in terms of, I think that's an issue. So for me, it's an issue we'd want to keep an eye on, and maybe there could be a further potential to look at that as the mandate progresses. Go ahead, Kelly.
If the reform of the housing executive was able to progress, then the landlord section would be the same as every other social housing landlord, and they would lose the right to buy. it does sort of smack of a bit of a difference, you know, being taken. We're losing we're losing houses, and they're not proactively rebuilding those houses, and there's very little discouragement of somebody making a lot of money off those houses. So yeah, I agree with you, but I think that we need to find out where the housing executive is. I know that they'll be up with us again, but it'd be interesting to see where they are with their reform piece.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Morris.
great to have an update from the housing executive just on that actual topic.
Have we? Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's not
Okay.
scheduled at the minute, but we can
No.
seek that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Members want that.
Okay. Thanks, members. Moving on then to departmental reply on page 8.4 on committee queries on housing issues. And members, in relation to those on page 8.14, any comments or content to note? Content to note. Thank you, members. At page 819, there's a reply from Sport NI following their briefing session here on the 2nd of May and the follow-up information requested from them. Any comments, members, or content to note that for now? Content to note. Thank you. Members, at page 827, there's a departmental reply to committee queries following the briefing session by the Fuel Poverty Coalition. And again, I'm conscious that we will be discussing this winter fuel payment, but do members have any comments in relation to that item? Content to note for now. Yeah, thank you. At page 830, there's a departmental reply to committee queries following the briefing session by Renter's Voice. Any comments in relation to that? Content to note. Thank you. At page 832, there's a departmental reply to committee queries on the job start scheme, the 50 plus scheme. Any comments in relation to that, members? Yeah.
Just to comment, obviously, I welcome the information, and it'll be useful when we do get the final report as to the types, the categories of work and stuff like that. But I've very much seen the widespread of council areas all benefiting, which is really, really good. And it'd be really good just to know a clarity in, because I've seen very much, there was a range of employers, but very heavily dominated, whereby a breakdown of the individual companies and the number of placements the companies had. Because I've seen very much in dairy, it was like 27, 28 companies, 27, 28 placements, whilst in other areas it might have been 20 companies and 100 placements. So it'll be really, really good, I think, and very much welcome the work done. And I would be interested to see, and I know they'd agreed that they would give us a 6-month report, so it'll be interesting to see the range of categories and employers that have supported the individuals.
Yeah, I think it would also be useful, and I know there was a number of issues around younger people who were on the scheme, and the department were able to address some of those, but I think it would be of benefit to see if there's any plans at this stage to finance or fund or re-initiate the younger person scheme, because I think while it's welcome for the over 50s, it was also beneficial to many young people as well. So just ask the department for their plans around that.
Could I just ask one question? Sorry, it's just gone back to page 811, which I kind of missed, regarding the house sales that you mentioned. I know we're looking for information work. It did mention regarding the capital receipts of 20.9 million. Went back to the housing executive for disabled adoptions and landlord investment for 23-24. Is that the same for 24-25? Is that investment, capital receipts, going back to the housing executive?
Was that a policy they apply every year?
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Okay, members, content with that? Thank you. So, members, then, on page 835, there's a departmental reply to committee queries on the ongoing review of grant funding. Do members have any comments or content to note? Sian?
Yeah, it was just on the piece about the arts sector. Obviously, any money, any allocation is a positive thing. But it's the report that was mentioned on the working and living conditions of artists just at the end there. It is pretty stark reading in terms of, I think it's 11%. Yeah, the baseline shows artists have faced a real term reduction in overall income by 11% in the last 10 years, with over 60% considering moving outside of Northern Ireland because they simply cannot make a living here. I just think it would be really, really good to get an update from the Arts Council. I know they're on our list. But from the Arts Council specifically on that report, I think it's a really important piece, particularly around the freelancers within the arts sector.
Yeah, and it is an issue, and it's clear that we're much worse in terms of support here than in other places. We do have a session planned in relation to that, and I think that is an issue that I would also be keen to explore. I think we should. I mean, I don't think we fully take account of the value, including economic value. Never mind all of the other values that are very unique and very, very capable and talented sector brings. So I think that is something that we should be keeping an eye on. Yeah. Thank you.
Sorry.
Yeah.
No, it's not on this issue if you want.
So go
Well, I
ahead.
just want to clarify, we were requesting a briefing from the Arts Council prior to get the status quo and further information on that before any date for an event or anything like that. Yeah.
I think if we can get a date for the event in the forward work plan, I think that would be useful. But even just letting the Arts Council know that this would be something of particular interest regarding that report, if that's okay. But if we can get a date in the forward work plan, I think that would be really positive.
You mean a written briefing or?
A written briefing would be fine, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, yeah.
Just a miss of me, but the Affordable Warrant Scheme, page 828, and I know there was other references to it throughout the paper, but I'd seriously like to get an update on the affordable warrants, given they want a fuel payment and what has happened and the cut there for those not on pension credit. Just from the figures, and it came from two different pieces of correspondence, it's basically saying from September 23 to June 24,
Yeah.
there's over 8,500 issued applications, over 3,300 have been returned. As of this moment in time, there is 1,333 ongoing, only 486 have been assessed. There's another 418 eligible following inspection, and there's 429 awaiting a grant. And the actual budget going forward is only 2 million, which can only allocate to 360. So, from my reckoning, that means there's no affordable warrant scheme for people this year, essentially. So I would really, really be keen to get an update from the department of exactly the current position regarding application forms. I would like to get a breakdown of those that are waiting an outcome, because I do know, and I would have constituents myself who are in that system who are not aware of how long they will have to wait, and I'm really, really concerned, particularly our more vulnerable constituents who are living in some accommodation which is really, really poor and really need immediate support, particularly, and I would be concerned about their ongoing health needs as well. So I'd really I think it's really important that we get detailed information on those currently awaiting the grant and a breakdown of their needs and what the department is going to do going forward.
Yep. Members content with that approach? Yeah.
Do you want me to summarise that back? So
Yeah.
detailed information for the committee in terms of an updated current position, the waiting times for applications and the status of the budget in terms of ability to meet the demand.
Yeah, and a breakdown of the households that are currently waiting and the work that they require.
Breakdown of households. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So at page then 837, members, there's a departmental reply to our queries on the framework for interpretation, translation and transcription services. Do members have any comments or in relation to that item? Content to note. Thank you. Members, at page 839, there's a departmental reply to a committee request for further information on budget. So I'll ask for comment. However, I do want to say myself that I do believe that given the financial situation, given the length of time it's gone, I think, and given the business case is with us as well, and that'll be coming up later, it will be useful at this point maybe to seek a briefing from the Minister around the financial situation, where things sit currently, how that is impacting on the business plan. So would members be content that we seek a ministerial update?
Yep.
Yep. Clerk, are you content?
Yeah.
Action that?
That in writing, yeah.
So members, then at page 864, there's a departmental reply to committee queries on the Meanan Square project. Any comments on that, members, or content to note? Content, thank you. At page 866, there's a reply from the Energy Savings Trust to committee queries on the Sustainable Energy Programme. Any comments in relation to that, members? No? Members content, thank you. At page 867, there's a ministerial reply to committee queries on the Local Housing Allowance. Any comments in relation to that, members, or content to note? Content, thank you. At page 869 then, there's a ministerial reply to committee queries on funding for the Skull Spraga Okeja Hialuraha scheme. Do members have any comments or on that issue?
Just acknowledge, I'm glad that the Minister has acknowledged just the usefulness and that of the scheme in itself, and that it's disappointing just that they're confined then to the budget that's already been allocated for us in the Gaeilge. But I hope anyway too that through those channels that will be supported as best possible.
Thank you, Melissa. Members otherwise content to note? Yep. Members, as already referred to at page 871 then, there's a departmental reply to the committee's request for a copy of the departmental business plan. So we have agreed that we'll seek a briefing from the Minister. Any other comments, members, at this stage, or content there to note? That for now.
Sorry, Chair. The only thing, I just think that we should all have it in the back of our minds, the cliff edge that we're approaching when it comes to the WSP, the cliff edge. The fact that if nothing is done, they will just fall off, regardless of whether this committee or the Assembly is passionate about their retention. So I just, in my head, I would really like to hear from the Minister, particularly around the mitigations. I know that we're due to get his report before the 31st of December, but there are families who are now 6 months away from a cliff edge, and that's at the forefront of my mind when I'm dealing with constituents. So I think just time is ticking down on that. I just want to know where the Minister's at with that.
You can update.
Absolutely, just on the WSP the mitigations, and maybe it's appropriate to mention here, Chair, the consultation on that was very poor. The fact that it was done over the summer with 3.5 weeks, 4 weeks, at a time when organisations were at limited capacity over the summer, the fact that it closed the first week in September, and also just the language around it was something I'd written to the private office about, because when you looked at that, if you did not know that welfare supplementary payments meant mitigations, you'd have no idea what it was about. So I just think I welcome that the department extended that consultation by 1 week, but we need to be looking at statutory consultations of a much longer period, especially when it's as important as this is. So,
Thank you.
Members content? Yeah. Okay, members, then page 916, there's a reply from TEO to a committee query on the development of an anti-poverty strategy. So, given that that is not included in the draft programme for government, I think we do need to keep an attention on this. I feel we need to hear from the Minister in relation to progress on that. It's been ongoing for such a long time now, and we've been under the impression that a lot of the work had been done. So are members content that this be brought back for further consideration, that we keep this and bring this back onto the agenda?
absolutely, and especially given that it wasn't included as a priority in the programme for government. When you look at Scotland, who have made one of their programme for government priorities, the abolition of child poverty, it's not about the cost to do these things, it's about the cost when we're not doing them. This is right across all departments, and frankly I think from the day that we were back in this place we've been talking about this anti-poverty strategy, and we're 7 months on.
Go ahead, Kelly.
I was going to say, should we write to our colleagues in the Executive Office Committee to ask them what updates that they have had or any work that they're doing on it, so there's not duplication, and if there needs to be a joint committee approach on this, the two committees coming together, perhaps there's something there.
Members content with that suggestion? Yep. Content, Clerk, with you? Yep.
Content with that.
Okay, thank you, members. So, members, we're moving on then, and thank you for all of that. We're moving on to agenda item 5, which is the extension of automatic pensions, extension of automatic enrolment bill, and we're receiving a briefing this morning from the Association of British Insurers. So, if we can just give a moment to get them organised to the table.
Good morning.
Good morning. So, members, I'd now like to welcome the following representatives of the British Insurers Association. Alistair Ross, who's Assistant Director and Head of Public Policy for Scotland, Wales and the North, and Ben Infield, who is Policy Advisor in Long-Term Savings Policy. So Alistair, I think it's yourself. I maybe go back to invite you to make a brief opening statement, 5 or 10 minutes maximum, please, and then allow members to move on to questions from members. So,
thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much, everyone. I'll actually pass over to my colleague Ben, who's going to do the opening statement.
okay, thank you. Go ahead, Ben.
Thank you very much for having us. So, the ABI, the Association of British Insurers, is the voice of the UK's world-leading insurance and long-term saving industry, representing about 300 firms within our membership. And here today we're talking about automatic enrolment extension. Just like to say that automatic enrolment has been a huge success, increasing the number of people saving into pensions across the UK, bringing a further 10 million people into pension saving. In Northern Ireland specifically, we've seen a substantial increase in the percentage of employees aged between 22 and 29 specifically, participating in the workplace pension scheme. So that's from 25% in 2012, which was pre-automatic enrolment, up to 72% in 2022. However, there's still a lot to do. So the first decade of automatic enrolment increased the amount of people saving to a pension phenomenally, but now the next decade needs to be about making sure those people are saving enough for a sustainable retirement. As part of that, the Pensions Extension of Automatic Enrolment Bill, which we're here to talk about today, does a big job in terms of extending the pension eligibility for automatic enrolment down to people aged 18, whereas it's currently set to 22, and also would allow people to save from the first pound that they earn, whereas at the moment there's a lower earnings limit of around £6,000. So that would be a tremendous help to, as I say, those lower age people, meaning that they wouldn't have to save as much later in life due to the wonders of compound interest, but also would offer a huge boost to the lowest income earners due to currently missing out on that first chunk of pension savings on the income that they earn. So, we are very supportive of this bill, and beyond the measures that we're talking about today, we also are calling for a gradual increase of the minimum contribution under automatic enrolment over the next 10 years. So as an organisation, we believe that we need to get towards 12% of total pension contributions. At the moment, we're at 8%, and that would, in our vision, be split evenly between employees and employers, given that there's also the government tax relief element of that as well. So I will stop there and just ask Alistair if he would like to add anything further.
No, I think you've covered it off for now, Ben. We're happy to move to questions, and you can get the full use of the time you've got with us.
Okay, well, thank you. So I suppose a couple just for myself first, then I'll go to members. But in relation to, and that's a significant improvement from 25% to 72%, do you have a breakdown of sort of within age bands of how that, or where the gap, so the remainder of the gap, can you identify who those people are, and do you have any advice for us in terms of how we can then try to close that gap and engage those people?
Sure. So don't have a huge plethora of statistics on each age cohort. I would say those within the automatic enrolment eligibility, so 22 up to state pension age, we have seen fantastic improvement. Where there is still work to be done, and what this bill seeks to address, is those who are 18 to 22. So we have seen that go up from 1% to 17%, which again is a massive increase, but still needs to go up by a lot. And bringing in those 18-year-olds as part of this bill would tremendously increase that number, because they'll be automatically enrolled. Currently, they can opt in to pension saving, and they would still benefit from employer contributions if they earn over £6,000 or so pounds. But just bringing them in automatically would massively increase the number of people saving.
Yeah, I mean, as Ben said, and as you would expect, the number of people, the cohort of pension scheme savers in workplace schemes increases as you get older. So I think it's 83% of the workforce in that 40 to 49 group, and also in the 50 to 59. So they're in a good place. They're well advanced in terms of building up a pot for their retirement. And it's worth remembering that retirement now is something that can last maybe between 20 to 25, even 30 years or more. And while we're talking today about the accumulation phase of building up your pension pot, you also need to actually put more thought now into the decumulation phase. So once you start drawing it down, do you buy an annuity under the old model and just have a fixed income coming in for the rest of that term, and whether that term is now going to be 20 years or 25 or even 30 or more, depending on your life expectancy. The concept of a pension and how you operate it now is quite different. So the people in the older age groups are probably better placed, and Ben already touched on the number of people in the younger cohort. We've seen significant increase in that, but there's also room for improvement. Just to pick up on your question about promoting it and engagement, this is the day job for Ben and I. We do this all the time, and what is absolutely clear is there is no one single way of doing this. There is no one guaranteed method to reach everybody that you want to get involved in, and the industry has adapted to that in a number of ways. So for people who are approaching retirement, there is advice available through the Money and Pension Service, which is free advice through the Money Helper Scheme. I took advantage of it myself recently, just to kind of start thinking about where your position is in terms of the amount of money that you're likely to need for retirement, and are you on track for that, and will that keep you in the kind of lifestyle that you're looking for. The Pensions and Lifetime Savings Association estimates that if you want to have a minimum income for your retirement, that's going to be about £14,400 a year. And again, that has to last across a significant period of time. That's the minimum level. If you want to be quite kind of comfortable, maybe have a wee foreign holiday from time to time, run a wee car, all those kind of things, you're actually looking at, a single person's looking at an income of about £43,000, £100,000 a year, and a couple will be looking for almost £60,000 a year. So working out is your pot going to be able to deliver that kind of thing is something you can do at various points in your career. You can have the Money Helper Service, as I mentioned, when you're getting towards retirement. You can have a midlife MOT, where in your mid-40s you'll start looking and just checking when you've still got a significant amount of earnings capacity, so you can still add to your pot significantly in the second half of your career, if you like, when your earnings are hopefully going to be a bit higher. You can still take steps there. But the younger cohort is a bit more challenging. To use a personal example within our family, our oldest daughter, 22, she made my day earlier this week when she sent me a message and said, "Guess what, Dad, I've opened a workplace pension." I said, "That's great, that's my girl." And then she said, "Yeah, it's only another 45 years before I get the benefit of it." And I couldn't argue with that, but she was understanding the importance of opening a pension earlier, because as Ben said, there's very important reasons for doing that. The earlier you start, the more you accumulate over time, and you can develop a greater pot based on the concept of compound interest, that you might not be saving an awful lot at the start, but that grows over an extended period of time. That's the industry, that's the kind of professional answer. I honestly didn't think I would have been doing this even a few short weeks ago, but I'd point you towards the influencer and TV celebrity Gemma Collins from The Only Way is Essex, who we've just recruited to run our pension attention campaign this year. She's exactly the kind of person that we need to be working with, because she reaches audiences that, with the greatest respect, Ben and I can't really do. People recognise her, they pay attention to her. She's got a huge social media following. She's someone who's on the TV. She's someone who's in magazines. She's in the places where young people are, and she's going to help them talk about and understand pensions. And she's got a very clear message. To quote her, she says, it's free money. So if you start off a pension just now with automatic enrolment, you're going to be paying a proportion of your salary, a small proportion, but you're also getting free money essentially from your employer who's making a contribution, and also from the government in terms of tax relief. So we are always looking and pushing. Gemma Collins is the celebrity we're using this year, and she's already proving to be very effective. Last year we used the TV presenter Timmy Mallet, who appeals to a different kind of demographic from a different period, and before that we'd used Big Zoo, the rapper and celebrity chef. So it's all about trying different things in different ways to get people thinking about the pension at different points in their lives and in their careers. So there's a lot of work goes into that. We're off to a good start. As Ben said, automatic enrolment has been transformational. I would argue it's probably been the most effective public policy intervention by the government in the UK for the last 10-15 years or so. It's making a tremendous difference. We need to keep that momentum going forward now, and one of the really important parts is the proposals that have been set before the Assembly in terms of the changes under this bill.
So in relation to those proposals, would you have any concerns or any comment to make in relation to the bill itself, or issues kind of potential unintended consequences that might arise?
I'll pass to Ben in a moment if I may, but no, we're very supportive of the bill. It would keep you in line and in step with what's happening in Great Britain, which is very important from a workers' mobility perspective, if nothing else. We're also very conscious of the development of auto-enrolment in the Republic of Ireland, which is at a much earlier stage. The legislation has been passed this year, and it's going to take the best part of 10 years probably to get up to a comparable point to the UK scheme, but it's very important that you have that parity. It's important that it comes forward. The extension argument we've already kind of touched on in terms of the benefits for younger people, and also the ability to start contributions from the first pound that you earn rather than waiting to the threshold. But I'll hand over to Ben because he's the expert on this.
Thanks very much. So no, I wouldn't say there are particular concerns. I think it does a brilliant job in extending the success of automatic enrolment, as was said. Firstly, by making it simpler, because I think if you ask anyone about the so-called band earnings, where you don't get any pension contributions, as I say, until you've earned over £6,240, that's very complicated. If you can just say to people, well, you start earning contributions as soon as you earn money, I think that's a fantastic improvement. Similarly, for employers, I think it offers a simplification, because instead of having to segregate your 18 to 22-year-olds who aren't automatically enrolled, you can now add everyone who's 18 and up. I think the other point to make as well is huge political consensus around automatic enrolment. So it was actually the Labour government back in 2002 who started this process. It's gone through subsequent changes of government in Westminster. It survived the COVID pandemic. So even through the furlough scheme, the automatic enrolment payments were guaranteed as part of that. So I think it's a very logical extension to successful automatic enrolment policy, and unlike when it was first rolled out, all the institutional infrastructure is there already, so it's much simpler than when it was first introduced.
Okay, thank you. So I have Sian, then Morris, and then Kelly at this point. Yep.
Thank you very much. Thank you both for your report and your presentation. And this might be something you might not be able to answer, but that's okay. I suppose just in terms of the automatic enrolment, have you anecdotally heard of any kickback, I suppose, from smaller businesses, things like that, who might be under a bit more pressure when they are having to expand that out to their entire workforce? I know obviously you're saying it streamlines it and it's a bit easier on the admin side, but just on the financial implication, I am shocked at the gender disparity, and I know that there are some reasons in there, whether that's women taking caregiving breaks in their employment and more likely to be in lower paid jobs and things like that. But other than the automatic enrolment, is there anything else and any other interventions that have been seen within the industry to actually improve that that gender pension gap beyond expanding automatic enrolment, and the same then for the ethnic minority groups?
Yep. I'll maybe answer the point on employers' views, and I'll maybe defer to Ben if that's okay on the gender pensions gap. So in terms of employers, as you would expect, we've spent a fair amount of time over the last 10 years plus talking to the likes of the Federation of Small Businesses and also to the CBI in terms of the representation of larger businesses as well, because we absolutely recognise their concerns about additional overheads to their operating costs at a time when they're under significant pressure. However, what I would say is that this is mandatory, this is the law now, you actually have to provide this requirement. And one way of looking at the employer contribution is it's actually part of the overall reward package. So if you're going to get technical about it, you could actually describe the employer pension contribution as deferred salary. It's part of the overall pay that their employees are entitled to. The legislation sets out the minimum contributions. Some employers do go further than that, and one of the reasons why they're doing that is that they see it's a competitive advantage. As we're aware, the labour market is relatively tight in the UK. There's not an awful lot of slack in that, and so employers are having to think, how can I be a more attractive proposition to prospective employees than my various competitors are. And one way of doing that is showing that you're actually a responsible employer and you do the right thing and you're prepared to make that commitment to support your staff and take that longer term view about their benefits, along with things like providing healthcare, providing above minimum wage packages where that's affordable for the business, but absolutely recognise that the pressure that are on employers. Some of the numbers we've looked at in terms of reducing the contribution threshold as proposed under the legislation, it would work out costing an employer about £4 a week per employee. Now that doesn't sound like a huge sum of money, but obviously that's over a 52-week period for every year, and that's dependent on the number of employees you have. But when you're already making that contribution, I would argue that it's not a substantial step up to then embrace the increases that we're talking about here for the younger workforce.
Thanks very much. If I can just pick up a few points on the employer perspective and then can go to gender and ethnicity pension gaps. So something to add as well is in terms of employer ambition. So there have been some interesting surveys of employers. I think it's widely recognised by a lot of employers that they don't think that their current pension contributions and the system that they have will actually reach retirement adequacy. So there are, I think it's half of UK employers want to specifically address retirement adequacy in the next 2 years. So I think there is a lot of ambition among employers to help with this point. And also just to say, we wouldn't sort of wish this policy change to come in one fell swoop. It should probably be over a number of years, so employers have the time to arrange cash flows appropriately and make arrangement for this to come in over gradual time. Just on the gender and ethnicity pension gaps point, we are in total agreement about the gender pension gap being astronomical. So figures we have are average pension pots for women would be £69,000 compared to £205,000 for men. So it's staggering. Unfortunately, that is to some degree of reflection to the gap in earnings that we see in the economy. But also there are specific things we can do. So this bill that we have would help women proportionally much more, because we know that women are overrepresented in the lower income earners, and as I say, that £6,240, where currently you don't start paying pension contributions on, is a much bigger chunk to somebody on a lower earning than it would be to somebody on a much higher earning. So proportionally, it's a much bigger gain for those people. I would also say something we focus on a lot as the ABI is divorce. So we know that in most divorces, pensions are not something that are discussed, but legally there is the right to share all assets, and so it's something that we're very keen to progress. And again, that comes back to the point of engagement, to make sure that particularly single mothers or divorced women, when they do get to retirement, don't suddenly have this surprise that actually there isn't that pension retirement there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. Morris?
Thank you very much, Chair. Thanks, gentlemen, for coming in front of the committee today. I take a different viewpoint from if the bill is introduced, you're going to be talking about 18 to 22-year-olds. Have you had any engagement with education establishments, especially through the careers advice, to advise young people who are going into employment that the benefits that would be accrued if they had a decent investment into a pension scheme from an early age? Have you engaged with the education in any way, education establishments?
It's a very good point. So we work with the Money and Pension Service which is very active in Northern Ireland, and its remit runs to financial education. So that's some of the kind of curriculum-based stuff you're talking about there in terms of helping students at an early age understand what a pension is, how it works, what the benefits are, but also in terms of that transition of going into the workplace and just being aware that your employer will be offering you the chance to opt into a workplace pension. And it's important to point out that, you know, it's a mandatory requirement for the employer to provide it. It's not compulsory for the employee to take it up. There is an element of choice there. We're very pleased that about 9 in 10 people do take that up, but that still means there's 1 in 10 who, for whatever reason, aren't availing themselves of that option and that opportunity, and as Gemma Collins said, getting the free money either from their employer or from the government. So there's still work to do there, and it comes back to what I said earlier. We are part of a team, if you like, that are tackling this, and we're always looking to work with different partners that can help us reach groups in society that we're not currently in touch with. Gemma Collins is one way of doing that. The Money and Pension Service in Northern Ireland, we're actually catching up with them after this meeting. They're another really important partner for that. But if you have any particular views or advice on other groups or organisations we should be talking to, we're always interested in exploring that and sharing the materials that we've got, and also learning from them what resonates with people that are in that kind of situation where they're leaving education and they're starting full-time work or part-time work, and they're not really familiar with the concept of a pension.
Be in touch. Chair, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Morris. And then I have Kelly, Brian and Ciara.
Thank you very much. The legislation proposed is to take it down to 18, but we have 16-year-old apprenticeships. And one of the concerns that I have is that we're actually excluding, at the time that we need to encourage people as early as possible to get into their pension. Apprentices don't get paid an awful lot of money. To be honest, rather than seeing it the other way, as you talked earlier about competitive advantage for employers, actually apprentices have a hard time getting employers, to take up the apprenticeships. I think it would have been better if we'd gone down to 16, but we are where we are with this legislation. I'm just actually thinking then on apprenticeships. Northern Ireland has a skills gap, and there's skills strategy coming forward. We will be looking for more people to be in those skills. Are there, like Morris has asked, is there any discussions then having with the further education colleges for those pupils who are not in academic education but other education for their way forward? They will actually have started work earlier than those other people, and I'm quite keen that we don't lose them, because they will have 2 years of possibly up to 2 years of employment, albeit on a terrible apprenticeship salary, but if we could have their employers encouraged to include that within their apprenticeship, for instance, that would be wonderful. But that will be for under 18s. Some over 18s, they may be NVQ level 2, 3, 4 at that stage. I'm just wondering if there's been any push on that, and has there been any discussion with government so that when they're investing in apprenticeships that they encourage those employers to take up this?
No, I mean, again, what you're touching on would fall within the remit of the Money and Pension Service here, but we're certainly happy to take that with them. In terms of discussions with government, it's not something specifically that we've discussed, but we're very open to do that, and I'll take that away as an action point today to write to the department and see if we can have a conversation just to understand what's going on there and what we might be able to contribute as an industry in terms of information for those kind of 16 to 18-year-old apprentices who are in a bit of a specific position. That's very welcome indeed. We'll follow up on that.
Yeah, I have an apprentice nephew at who's been through it. He's almost out the other end, and there's so many things for our 16 and 17-year-olds they're excluded from. Housing executive. There's lots of things there. It would be good just if they're already committed to working, and they're going out to work and they're earning a terrible salary at 16 and 17, that their savings for the future are so important.
I can just add to that as well. So obviously today we're talking about automatic enrolment, so where people are automatically put into saving. If you're 16, if you do earn over that £6,240, you can opt in yourself, and then you'd still benefit from the contributions the employer makes and the tax relief. If you earn under that amount, you can request to join, but it would be down to the employer whether they want to do that or not. So there is obviously scope to extend things more, but
The automatic is 18, but they can.
exactly,
Yeah,
they'd have the
we'll
right to be on the same terms as somebody 18. They just have to do it willingly themselves, which with pensions is often the difficulty engaging people.
And it may be worth actually considering an education or putting that into careers or you know, I don't think that'll be widely known.
Yeah.
It'd be useful to promote that a bit maybe. Brian, go ahead please.
Thank you, Chair. And obviously there's full support around the committee for this move, for the bill. I want to ask a bit about what could be unintended consequences. Whether it would, obviously employers will be doing this for their higher earners and their older employees. Whether this extension of the lowering of the age limit and removal of the earnings threshold, whether that will make employers less inclined to take on young people, maybe in seasonal employment over the summer, or else find ways to avoid this, either by paying cash in hand, not through formal employment, or encouraging young people almost to be self-employed. So what support will you provide for employers to ensure that they are employing people properly, that they're not avoiding this obligation, responsibility? So yeah, and do they have, I presume they will have the normal choice, either might be employers use a certain pension company, but I presume if the employee has the private pension, will they have the right to say, I would like it paid into my pre-existing pension policy, or can the employer says, no, I have it set up with a certain one and I just want to keep it that way?
So if I take that last point first, so currently you would have the right to request your employer to pay into your existing pension, but that would be down to their discretion. There has been talk over the last year whether we should move to a model where that would be a universal right for everyone, but that's not been decided upon. So assuming that employer would like to keep it within the scheme they've set for all the rest of the employees, it would go into that workplace.
The employer has that right.
Yes, yeah. And just on the kind of wider point about meeting that automatic enrolment requirement. So the pensions regulator is in charge of making sure all employers in the UK who have eligible employees do provide those pensions for them, and they do come down and enforce their fines where they do find that employers aren't living up to those liabilities. So I think that's maybe a separate question. The question is, I guess for 18-year-olds, whether there would be ways to sort of go outside of the standard employment practices. I think potentially, but I think given that most employers will employ a range of ages, so I think it would be much simpler and probably more cost effective to use the existing pension provider setup that they have, and to automatically enrol people from 18. As I say, it kind of is a simplification because they know anyone over the age of 18 just goes in that bucket for an HR system, or anyone having to do the paperwork. It is a simplification, I would say.
Mm-hmm. And who supports through the chair, who supports the employers? I know they should have it set up anyway for their older employees, but is it through the department, or do you provide support yourselves?
So support in terms of
who do people go to if they have concerns? Either the employee, I suppose, for employees actually in the first, but also for employers, just to support them to make sure there is compliance.
Sure. So the pensions regulator would be able to tell an employer whether they need to provide pensions for their staff, because there are those kind of eligibility metrics. So they go to the pension regulator for that. The firm that the employer chooses to have their pensions with will give them a lot of guidance and support in terms of running their scheme. So the kind of employer role is to share the information of the employees and make sure paperwork is done. But actually, in terms of the investment and the pensions, that's all done by the pension provider themselves. So we're representatives of those providers, so we wouldn't necessarily help employers themselves, but there are also HR services that you can get, or there are employee benefit consultants who would be able to help employees decide which pension arrangement would be best, for example. Yeah.
And from the employee's point of view, obviously you've got the trade union movement, which is a very firm and clear supporter of the whole principle of pensions, but especially of auto-enrolment. So you've got their capacity to organise and advise employees through the trade union movement. And, you know, we mentioned the Federation of Small Businesses earlier and the CBI, and you've got the Northern Ireland Chamber of Commerce. They as organisations are all very much up to speed with it. I think there's a broad support for the principles. It's more about the phased implementation so that you're not seeing a significant hike in overheads in a particular financial year, and good consultation and essentially a pathway or a clear route towards the increases over time, so that employers can see them coming and build towards that. So but between that kind of collective, there's a lot of advice both for employees and for employers out there.
Okay, okay.
Thank you, Brian. Ciara?
Thank you. It's just a quick one. You'd mentioned about the increase in the employer contributions to 5%, with a further increase for employer and employee contributions to maybe 6%. It was kind of in your recommendations. Has there been any impact analysis done on that? And as you just said, it's really important with a phased implementation of it. But I would be concerned just in relation to obviously the gender gap analysis already that has been highlighted here this morning, and what maybe impact that could have. Because I'm conscious, even as a woman in our 50s, I would, whilst in my previous job, I had a number of women, whilst when they turned 55, cashed out on their pensions because they needed the money, given the situations, and these are single women living on their own. So I'm gravely concerned that could be a trend, and if there's a further increase. So I would love to know, probably not for today, but if you have any insight into maybe the ongoing impact and maybe potential impact before the end of maybe this mandate with a further increase of up to 6%.
So I should just say, to be clear, the 12% overall was 6% from the employer and 6% from the employee. That's something we want to see over the next sort of decade, and the Labour government, as it's come to power, has committed to holding a pensions review. So adequacy and these minimum contribution rates are something that they're looking at now. In terms of the work we've done, we would propose it's only a 1% increase for employees over a sort of 10-year period. So we think that is quite a meetable goal. In terms of employers, it would be 3% to balance out. Again, that would be spread across a good decade in order to allow firms to get used to those costs. We would also say that there needs to be flexibility within the system. So 12% would be an ambition for most people to save, but we'd also want to see further flexibility. So currently you can opt out completely of pension saving if you feel it's not affordable. We'd want to see perhaps an ability to opt down if there's times where people are finding it hard but don't want to lose their pension contributions completely, or in the other direction you could maybe have a 10% total where you can opt up, so the ambition to get to 12%. So we want greater flexibility. Also, in terms of the sort of financial resilience that people have, we're aware that there's a lot of lower earners who 12% overall would be a large amount of money. So we are also looking at things such as what's called a sidecar savings system, where you would have a short-term, easily accessible savings account attached. So that would fill up before your pensions. And then once that's, say you've got £1,000 to use in cases of emergency or financial distress, then you would go to the full pension contributions. So we're just adding further flexibility to allow people to meet their needs.
No, that's really, really useful that they are considering all of that flexibility. Regarding, you mentioned earlier, there is a 10% opt-out as it stands. What's kind of the breakdown of that? Would we, in general fashion?
So it does differ.
The individuals?
Sure. So if you look at the demographics, it does differ by ethnicity, gender, whether you're in the private sector or the public sector. So generally speaking, the public sector is much higher because there's kind of a defined benefit scheme there. Essentially speaking, there's very valuable pensions which exist in the public sector, which are much more of an encouragement, I think, to save. Across the private sector, the amount of people saving is slightly lower. Among people of white ethnicity, it tends to have the highest level of pension savings. For example, the Pakistani and Bangladeshi ethnicities, it's quite a bit lower, so around the sort of 70% mark. And then obviously if you split between gender and also part-time and full-time, as I said before, women are overrepresented in sort of low incomes and as part of that in part-time work. So it does tend to be slightly lower in those workers who are part-time. There's so many different ways to split it, so you can kind of look at the minutiae, but that's the sort of general picture, if that's helpful.
Okay, just a wee final one that occurs to me as we're talking there. So we've actually mentioned earlier artists and people. So I'm wondering, do you think there's sufficient protection for people who work in, very precarious work, 0 hours contract, the gig economy, hospitality, often heavily weighted towards young people, often heavily weighted towards women as well? Is there sufficient protection and encouragement and engagement in that area, in your opinion?
The kind of groups we're talking about here are some of the hardest to reach. So people that work in the gig economy, people that have multiple jobs, to support one overall income, they're having to do 2 or 3 different roles, none of which are likely to be terribly well paid. The people that work in sectors you mentioned, hospitality, ones that young people gravitate to early in their careers, they're some of the hardest groups to get through to. Obviously, if you're self-employed, you don't have, an employer looking after you, don't get the same requirements in terms of the provision of a pension opportunity. And, while people will take different approaches, so we are advocating the build-up of a pensions pot, so you can draw down that in retirement. There are other ways to build your assets. You could do it through property. And in terms of some of the ethnicities as well, you see some more breakdown in that, where people are more likely to put the money into property that they can then sell at retirement, and they'll move into a smaller place and they get the money that way, as opposed to building up pension saving. But the groups we're talking about are really quite difficult to reach and engage with. And as you said, because some of that employment is quite precarious. If you're taking a job on for a few months, you're not really thinking 45 years ahead to when you're going to be retiring and when you're going to start drawing down that money and the kind of lifestyle that you wanted to support. That's a million miles away from where you are at that point in time. So we are regularly looking at ways in which we can reach those kind of audiences, but also be realistic about what their expectations and what the requirements are. The requirements of a self-employed skilled professional, whether it's a tradesperson, a plumber or a joiner, whoever, is going to be quite different to somebody who's riding around an electric bike delivering meals. And you need to just be aware of the circumstances and the positions that these people are in, but at the same time they should not be excluded just because of the particular jobs that they've decided to take or the route they've decided to go down in terms of self-employment. And it's back to what I said earlier, there's no one single way, or there's no one single expert that's going to get you to absolutely all of these people. You look at the status of the various people in the UK and the pensions advice they give out. Probably the one that people listen the most to is Martin Lewis. And the reach that he's got through his television programme and through his website and through his various other activities is probably in excess of anything anybody else can do. But it's using all the different channels that we've got through financial journalists, so experts like Iona Bain, who's working with us in the Pension Attention campaign, who's able to speak from a younger person's point of view. She's got a different perspective because she's not part of the older workforce. She can sympathise with a lot of the challenges that people in those kind of circumstances have got and are facing as well. It's about finding the right kind of people that these different groups will listen to, and then making sure that they've got the material and the information that they need. Yeah.
And I am aware that I think Conor Murphy is working on better job kind of legislation. Hopefully that would improve, but far from being excluded, I think we need to make further efforts to include them, and because obviously that's a bit of a concern. So listen, thank you. That's been very useful, I have to say. Thank you for the briefing, and thank you for your response, particularly to members' queries there. And thank you for attending today. So I can let you get back to your back to your day job, as it were.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, Dan and Alistair. Okay, members, thank you. We're moving on then directly to agenda item 6, and this is a briefing by Pivotal. So, members, the briefing paper for the agenda item starts at page 921, and I'll just give a few seconds there to allow the table to be changed over. So, members, I would now like to welcome the following representatives of Pivotal to this morning's meeting. And first of all, Anne Watt, who's the Director of Pivotal, and Dr. James Greer, who's a Senior Researcher. So, good morning, both. And when you're settled, Anne, I'll go back to yourself there in terms of an opening statement, please. And if you can keep that brief, then we'll get to members' questions. Thank you.
So, good morning, everyone, and thank you for the invitation to the committee today. We're delighted to come and talk about our recent report on economic inactivity. So just to introduce Pivotal briefly, we're an independent public policy think tank, so we work to promote better use of evidence in policy and to try and inform and enhance debate about policy in Northern Ireland. And that is all I'm going to say. I'm going to hand over to James, who led on this report, and he's going to give you an opening statement, and then we look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, James.
Thank you, Chair. And yes, and just like Juan says, thank you for the opportunity to speak with you here today. So in our report, we focused on economic inactivity. This was published in May. So this was a focus on people who are not in work and not currently seeking work. And within that report, since that report's been published, there's been new evidence that has come out where the statistics have maybe varied a little bit. Northern Ireland has swapped places with Wales in the northeast of England in terms of now been back to being the region in the UK with the highest rate of economic inactivity. So there's been minor changes, but essentially the overall picture and the major challenges for Northern Ireland are essentially the same now as they were whenever we published in May. Our report was based upon a study of the labour force survey data and the literature in this field. In particular, we benefited greatly from analysing the work of Mark McGill and his colleagues at Ulster University and the work of others such as Dr. Anne Devlin. And essentially the main kind of takeaways from our report were as follows. That despite historically unprecedented low levels of unemployment, and for Northern Ireland, very high rates historically of employment, consistently over 70%, Northern Ireland still has stubbornly high rates of economic inactivity. People not in work and not actively seeking work. Over 1 in 4 of the working age population are economically inactive. The latest quarterly figures just released on Tuesday have the rate at 27.5% in Northern Ireland. This is some 324,000 individuals. Now, obviously, behind these figures are the complex individual lives and families of many, many people in our community. And there are no catch-all easy explanations or answers to this question. It's very complex. But we can see that there are 4 broad categories of people who are economically inactive. We have those who are have responsibilities at home, caring for family members, for example, which leads to their status. We have those who have been in the fortunate position of being able to retire early. We have those who are in full-time education and not working. They're classified as economically inactive. So you could see that as actually a socially useful form of economic inactivity. And then I suppose the real focus of the conversation within the media and commentary has been the 4th group of those who are economically inactive due to sickness and or disability. And this is where the real disparity is between Northern Ireland and the UK overall, and indeed between Northern Ireland and Ireland overall. We can see that at the time of our report, some 11.9% of the working age population in Northern Ireland were economically inactive due to sickness and or disability. The figure for the whole of the UK, the equivalent figure at the time was 6.9%. So that's where the real disparity overall comes in. The data also show that the percentage of the working age population who are economically inactive due to health disability has been rising for the last 10 years and rising markedly since COVID, when previously it had been on a slight downward trend. Our working age population seems to be becoming sicker and to have more of a prevalence of disability. So what are the major policy implications for the findings in this report? Just obviously rushing through it at the start here. Just to emphasise, this is a complex cross-departmental challenge. Measuring it helps us understand our economy, the jobs market, family and home life, childcare, education, social and regional inequalities, and of course public health. But we want to just highlight a few of these implications in more detail. The level of sickness and disability in Northern Ireland does raise profound questions about the general health of the public at a time of long waiting lists and strains on services. An Ulster University report published in December 2023 states that Northern Ireland is the part of the UK with the highest rate of people who have left the workforce due to bad health. And mental health obviously is clearly a significant part of this challenge, in particular for a growing proportion of younger members of our society. Secondly, the employment rate for people with disabilities in Northern Ireland is significantly lower than the UK average and is the lowest rate of all 12 UK regions. So that's obviously a particular focus, and we know it has been for the department and for others. Evidence clearly shows that those who have become classified as economically inactive as opposed to unemployed are significantly less likely to be in employment in a year's time. Those who become classified as economically inactive move further away from the labour market than those who remain within the unemployed bracket. A key question that we know the department and others are considering is how social security and benefits and working conditions offered by employers might be better tailored to encourage and facilitate people to stay closer to the labour market, maybe through temporary absence from work or part-time work or other flexibilities. Finally, there are clear links between the wider social economic indicators, level of education and economic inactivity. This is doubly underlined when we look at the breakdown of inactivity rates in terms of council area. Regional development, which expands job opportunities and improving levels of education attainment, are some of the key policy instruments to reducing economic inactivity overall. I conclude by saying that within the wider context of European nations and regions, Northern Ireland, we have much to learn from other places that are facing similar challenges. Northern Ireland is actually, in terms of overall rates of inactivity, not a significant outlier. When we look at the European context, there are other European nations that have higher overall rates of inactivity. Maybe the profile is different. Maybe there's more people who are looking after family and home, and there are maybe lower levels of sickness elsewhere. But there are other places facing similar challenges. There's lots more I could say, but I just want to keep my remarks brief, and thank you again for the opportunity to speak today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. And it's an area actually I have to say I do have a particular interest in, and I suppose right from the outset, at every opportunity, and I'll do it today again, I challenge the actual term itself, economic, and I challenge it not only because it smacks of judgmentalism, but even more fundamentally than that, it's actually unhelpful, I think, in terms of addressing the issue, because if you don't name it correctly, then you're potentially trying to address the wrong issue. So to me, it's very often more linked to economic disadvantage, and that's the paradigm within which I think we should approach it. Because then you've touched on a good few, Dr. Greer, around the issue of disability, of sickness, mental health, education, full-time commitments, and indeed carers, which I have a particular interest as well. So when you say there that we have the highest levels of sickness and disability, there's also people who need to care for them. And very often the health service is not, and actually having worked in the health service myself previously, I know of cases where people have had to give up their job in order to take up a caring role. So I think in terms of how we support people in those roles, that will be hugely significant. I also think, and you touched on there as well, I think it's an under kind of considered issue around the regional disparity, particularly around transport. And access to interview, let alone to jobs. I think that's something that we need to really consider how we address that. So I think it's timely. It is something clearly that it's to almost everyone's advantage that we address the issue. I am acutely aware of the disability one. That's the one where my question is focused around. We are probably not uniquely, but we're certainly not among the best in terms of supporting people with disability into work and supporting them to remain in work, which can often be an issue. What would your thoughts be on that in terms of solutions, in terms of policy or legislative drivers that would support people and facilitate, in fact, people with disabilities to be involved rather than excluded from work?
Well, I think, thank you, Chair. I think you've touched on a key issue. The obvious disparity between employment rates is very striking, and that there have to be lessons to learn from other regions that have higher rates of employment for those with a disability. This has to be a question for employers at some level. We all know there's a very tight labour market. So in some of the conversations that we've been having recently with, for example, the Northern Ireland Union of Supported Employment, they would talk about how there's always been lots of good employers out there who want to provide opportunities and want to benefit from the expertise of those with different disabilities. But more and more employers are now realise that this is actually a necessity within a tight labour market. They need to look about how they can make their job packages more attractive and more realistic for people who have different challenges due to their disability. And I think a part of that question is also looking about how the profile within those categorised as having a disability is changing. And there is obviously a significant question over mental health and mental health strategy and how that is interacting with other challenges that people may have. So I think that's a big part of the answer as well. And then, of course, there is the question of social security and benefits and how they can increase financial incentives for people to stay in work and stop the legitimate fear of a cliff edge of seeking maybe part-time employment, flexible employment, and with having very strong legitimate fears about what that means about your medium long-term family income or household income. So it's incredibly complex, but I think there's some areas that are obviously need to be addressed.
And I think employment of people with disabilities is something that we're considering doing some follow-up work about, because that did stand out in the report, the huge difference between the rate in Northern Ireland and elsewhere. And so there's something seriously different, I suppose, about this place, whether it's the attitude of employers, perhaps, I don't know. So we want to look at that in more detail. And also, I think that is going to be increasingly important given this pattern of worsening health of our working age population that we've identified in the report. More people are sick and disabled, more people are leaving the workforce. So if that's the changing nature of our population, we absolutely need to think more about how we're making adjustments and providing support to enable people to work. And I would just emphasise something James says, that there must be a big role here for employers to hold on to people rather than let them drop out of the labour market. Because once somebody drops out of the labour market, then they get increasingly further away and less likely to move back in. So how can we work with employers or require employers to do more to support people who are facing particular health problems or indeed caring issues as well that you identified as well?
Thank you. And it actually underlines the absolute importance of the disability strategy as well, to factor all that in. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to go to quite a few members, so I'm going to go to Talmud Dollar Deuce, Goji Melissa, then Brian, Sean, Ciara and Kelly. So Melissa, Lana Riley, all.
Fáilte Roth, so very welcome here today. And I welcome the presentation and the report here too. And having worked with what was described as the bottom quartile for many years in terms of young people who lacked education, qualification and so on, I understand entirely many of the problems that they've faced in entering the labour market and that. And I think that even in reading the report that people can identify not only with all of the issues, but people who fall into all the different categories in that as well. But I just want to make one statement, you know, and I think of a term that we used to have at home. You might as well go idle as work idle. And effectively what that's saying is that in terms of job opportunity, you know, and the type of jobs that are available to people, if anything, what is that we can do there to not end up selling our region as a low-wage economy? Because effectively that impacts then again too on many of the people who might consider or not consider joining the labour market. Which brings me right round full circle. You might as well go idle as work idle. And in terms of that low-wage economy, I do think that has an influence. So what are your feelings on that?
Thank you, Member, for the question. I think this shows how this issue relates really clearly to the good jobs agenda and the question, particularly around, if we look at the demographic of the over 50s and that being a growing demographic of the economically inactive. So the types of jobs that are available, there's obviously physically demanding job. There's a physical question there that needs to be addressed. But there is the more fundamental question that you're asking about the quality of the jobs, the conditions, what the attractiveness of the pay, the ability. I mean, our broad position that we've started from this report, whilst acknowledging the Chair's comments, very strong comments at the start that we need to be not disparaging of people. We need to respect that there are many people that are economically inactive who are hugely valuable to our society in terms of volunteering, caring, other roles. That's obviously our starting point. But whilst acknowledging that, there is a fundamental value to work for the individual and to family in terms of their personal finances and the broader economic growth of the area. But key to that is the question of how the terms and conditions and are these good jobs, to put more broadly. So that is you're raising a very key question.
Thank you, Melissa. Brian?
Look, thank you for the report. I enjoy reading it in more detail. I think it's very welcome that you've done this level of analysis, and it's an important issue. As you say, that you're divided into 4 sections there. So those with caring responsibility, and of course people have all sorts of personal circumstances, you know, and as you've said, it's actually falling in Northern Ireland and across the UK, and it's a similar level. Retiring early sort of grew up to 2010, and then it seems it's declined in Northern Ireland, UK, and it's a similar level. Full-time education, Northern Ireland and UK rates are converging and fairly steady. So the sickness and disability is the one where Northern Ireland is steadily higher than the UK average, and actually seems the difference seems to be increasing. And again, all sorts of personal circumstances there. The 2 questions I have is, first of all, maybe it's in the report. How do you define? Does it go by the types of benefits that people are on? How do you define economic inactivity? Secondly, have you done an age profile on those who are defined as economic inactivity due to health, sickness or disability? And actually a third question is, we had a debate this week on the importance of funding for support services for people, and that was previously European Social Fund, and when the Shared Prosperity Fund came in, that was to replace that funding, and but again, those groups have no certainty. So maybe that's not something I don't know whether you've looked at that, but certainly on this committee and across the Assembly, there's strong recognition of the support of that, particularly community level support services that will have that reach, that people feel somebody who will support them, you know, and as you said earlier, the importance of the benefit system should always incentivise people to work, and they should feel that they're always better off. And in general, you know, people are better off working, better off financially and personally. You know.
Yeah. Can I just respond, and then I'll leave you with the definitions, James? But I think your observation about you know, the 4 different categories and how they've changed over time and how they compare to other UK regions really important, and that's why we focused in the report and in our comments on sickness and disability. I think, just to comment, really, one thing that surprised us when we looked at the data was that caring, economic inactivity due to caring, was not higher or indeed increasing, given the pressures on our social care system and the enormous number of people who are providing unpaid care, together with the affordability of childcare and how that's an increasing pressure for probably people at a different life stage, but it's a huge issue for younger families. So, we might see that inactivity due to caring going up, perhaps, because of those things. But anyway, James, do you want to answer the questions on the definitions?
In terms of the definitions, I mean, we're really following the Labour Force Survey definitions. So it's clearly to distinguish unemployment. So people who are classified as unemployed. So we've got an unemployment rate of 2% in Northern Ireland, which is historically, I don't need to tell any of the members here, astonishingly low if you think back to the 1990s or even just in the noughties as well. But that's people who are classified through the benefit system as unemployed. Economically inactive are people who are out of work and not currently available or seeking work. And there's been really good, interesting work done by Mark McGill and others at UU, the Economic Policy Centre and the EPICS Future Group, looking at this question about, well, can we really say perhaps that a section of the people who are economically inactive are actually, who say that they want to work, are they in a more traditional sense unemployed? So Mark McGill and his colleagues have come up with a real unemployment figure that they've classified in Northern Ireland that's maybe closer to 8%. So these are people who want to work, but for different challenges, short to medium term challenges, are unavailable to work, or perhaps feel discouraged that work is a possibility for them. And of course that relates particularly to people maybe with disabilities or other health challenges. So it's one of those things where the definitions are quite clear, but then you get beneath the definitions and people's lives are complicated and don't fit neatly into these categories. So, but that definition, I think, is important to clarify. And just thinking about, in relation to the other comments that have been made, the really big, one of the big interesting kind of historical changes has been the gender dimension to this, and this, of course, relates to family and care. That there's been a huge increase in the participation of women in the labour market, and that has led to the really changing profile of who are the economically inactive, and there's been this slight increase over time of male economic inactivity. So that's another dimension to consider.
So, through Chair, I mean, I agree that we shouldn't say economically inactive are not actively seeking work. As you say, some with the right support, many of those people may well consider and take up employment. But is there anything asked about age profiling for those on health and disability? Particularly in mental health.
That's a good question, and I can't remember the precise figures, but there has clearly been an increase, and this is not just in Northern Ireland, but it applies more broadly, an increase in the younger section of the population who are economically inactive due to mental health concerns. That has been a trend, and interestingly, within looking at these trends, of course, the pandemic and COVID really complicates trying to disentangle cause and effect, but we can see evidence that trend predates COVID in terms of younger parts of the population and having mental health related issues leading to inactivity. But I could maybe get back to Mr. Kingston with more detail on the age profile, but that has been something that we have looked at. I just can't quite remember the figures.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Sian?
Thank you. I'll try to be brief. I suppose I share your surprise at the caring responsibilities there. I would have thought that it would have actually have grown. For me, of particular interest is that Venn diagram between the rural communities and the gender balance, particularly in those more isolated areas where access to childcare is nearly impossible. And I think it's not just the cost, it's the actual infrastructure around that, and then the digital infrastructure in rural communities, and the actual physical public transport infrastructure, like how people actually get to job interviews and to jobs, as the chair had mentioned. I suppose, are there gaps in our policy that we are missing when it comes to that rural piece, I suppose, and how we actually, because there are a finite amount of job opportunities that can be had in rural communities. How do we, are there gaps in what we're thinking of here in trying to get those rural communities actually engaged in the job market, and then with particular interest then to obviously rural women? Are there initiatives that we should be kind of trying to look at there, that isn't just about the cost of childcare or the access to childcare? Or are there things we're missing?
Yeah, I think your question really draws out how this is complex. The data are divided into the 4 groups, but people's lives are complicated. They've childcare responsibilities, they've potentially got caring responsibilities for other people. They might have a sickness issue as well. They might be in a rural area, so it's all entangled. I don't think, to be honest, we haven't looked at policy solutions in this report yet. Something we might move on to. But I think you're absolutely right to identify the added barriers, and if there isn't public transport that'll get you to a job, if there isn't affordable childcare, but we haven't identified. Yes, we haven't looked at that kind of solution yet, so I'm not sure I can answer your question. Do you want to add anything?
I'd just add to go back to the comments made by the chair earlier, that this issue does highlight the kind of regional inequalities and the questions about developing good jobs in particularly west of the band, but also we look at the figures in parts of the North Coast as well that are a little bit higher. We could also look within Belfast, just to counter that a little bit. If we look at the picture within Belfast, we can see clearly higher rates of inactivity in the north and west of the city, and in areas with related to clear socioeconomic indicators related to deprivation. And we can also, just to make it even more complex, we think of the mental health picture. We can obviously trace that, perhaps some of this, back to the conflict and the legacy of the conflict. So there's those kind of localised dimensions going on as well, but there are clear, there's a clear rural-urban divide as well within the picture.
Ciara?
Okay, so thank you, James, Mark. I'm really pleased to read your report. It's quite detailed. It gives a real good overview of, obviously, those in the community are well aware of. And obviously you're conscious, even in our debate last week, the importance of the Building Sustainable Prosperity Funding. And currently we're at a cliff edge, because that is targeted investment in neighbourhoods and community to support those that are currently, as we say, economically inactive, but need actually support. And as someone who has worked in the field, the likes of the Foyle Community Works programme that was run in the city, and I led on that in the city, and I'm very clear that first and foremost, we have a huge number of people in our city that have talent, have that expertise, are really, really valuable, and they need support to get into work and to remain in work. And I'm also conscious we have a host of employers now that are desperate to support local people in the employment, because we do, as they would say, we have full employment this moment in time. So if these businesses and companies want to expand, we must go and look and support those that currently need that additional support to get into work and remain in work. And likewise, and from my experience, and that's working 20 years in a neighbourhood and community, mental health was huge. In my opinion, in any research we've done, you're talking 25%. And that's particularly young people, drug, alcohol addiction, homelessness, and also what I found in the older age group was trauma that they experienced throughout their life that they were never supported with or dealt with. So that's kind of my experience here. So what I would like, and also from someone who loves doing statistics all over the years, I know this is the North's average. I'm conscious, and I'm sure you have drilled down to super output area level, but I've worked in areas where it's up to 40%, if not more. and that has a real negative impact on our children and young people. And likewise, and I also agree with you, the further removed you are from employment, that intergenerational piece, we need to do something about that as well. And how do you do that? So I'm wondering, I know it's very long-winded, so I've loads of questions and I'm really keen to follow up in any further work. But how much more? I think we need to drill down and get behind the people and the statistics. And really what are the key barriers I've just mentioned regarding caring, healthcare, waiting lists, accessible childcare. These are all the huge barriers, and they're kind of set separately. And the stats are separately. How can we collate that, juxtapose that against those that are deemed economically inactive, to really drill down into? So I'm asking, are you doing future research? And because I think it's crucial now that finally it may get the priority it deserves, and the investment in it for it. So, and just your thoughts, and current programmes that are there to support those that are currently unable to work.
So I think this report was very much looking at the data, so it's quite a sort of hard evidence-based report on the published data. What it doesn't do is the more qualitative research where you talk to people in the real world about their lives and you find out about the complexity of their situations and the range of barriers they're facing and what they've tried in the past and how that hasn't worked, and all of that kind of important detail, which really influences people's experiences and again influences their decisions about what they're doing next in their lives. So we would want, as follow-up to this, having done something which is quite based on hard published labour market statistics, we'd want to do something which was much more about what does this look like in reality, to get under the skin a bit more of what's affecting people, because I'm always aware that you can have a policy approach in place. You could have a policy designed by civil servants and, reviewed by committees and passed by MLAs, but actually what happens in the real world can be quite different, and I'm sure that's your experience. How that works itself out in reality, it can be a different thing. So, any follow-up research we will do, we want to engage with people and hear about their experiences more. I'd also point to, I don't know if the committee's aware of the Epic Futures programme at Ulster University. They have received some quite a lot of Research Council funding to look at economic inactivity more. So it would be definitely worthwhile for the committee to speak to them about their research programme, because they'll be able to do things on a much bigger scale than what we're able to do. Do we know anything about Epic, any more about Epic at Ulster University?
I think it's in quite early stages, but there's very, very ambitious plans for their research programme, and they're, I suppose part of what we want to add is the public profile, but also to pick an area that maybe has been under-analysed by this other work that's ongoing. But definitely it's worth watching Epic Futures for where they take this conversation. I was just going to add just to your comment about the talent that's out there. We had some conversations with people working in the public sector who have specific job programmes, maybe particularly for younger people, maybe with mental health related issues in the past. And some of those stories that we heard of getting young people who maybe haven't been close to the labour market before into working for the public sector, and the talent and ability and skills that they have, really impressing everybody in the office and adding so much to the work environment. So there's so much potential out there in the community that could be tapped with the right kind of policy, Megan, that takes into account all these complex issues.
Thank you, Kelly. Yes.
Thank you very much. As you can see, you've piqued the committee's interest. There's lots of questions coming at you. I personally don't believe that we will ever get to the stage where we will have 100% of employment or economic activity in Northern Ireland, because there will always be people who cannot work.
Yep.
And that could be people with severe learning disabilities, physical disabilities and so on. There are people who don't want to work, and we've had the great retirement following COVID. So we have people who are finished with work at 55 to 65, who have saved for pensions and don't feel that they need to work. But we have the others, and a bit like Brian was teasing out earlier, it's the overlapping issues. So I'm looking in particular at the over 55s piece that you've pointed out. How many of those are actually people who don't want to work? They've worked, they've saved, they've got a pension, they're done with that. How many of them overlap with the other categories? Because you will have somebody, and I used to employ over 55s, people who had come off building sites because the cold weather, arthritis, it wasn't for them. So they were amazing bus drivers, absolutely amazing bus drivers within the community. Couldn't get over how fantastic they were. But they had another trade to go to. They had something else to do. I'm really interested to see, is there going to be more sort of look at each of those groups to drill down into actually of those what people who are deemed as economically inactive, actually which of them could be active, because as we know, the communities is looking at and has produced over 55s apprenticeships. And we'll be keen on that, but it's that overlapping. How many can we get down to the numbers of how many people actually they can't work because at an older age or at a younger age they've got disabilities and health issues, you know, if we have that. The other thing I just wanted to say is the carers allowance is means tested. I'm always very frustrated by this because it being means tested, it's counted as an income. So for me to have carers called economically inactive when actually they're fulfilling a role for society that we can't afford to do in the health sector. But it's that overlapping issues. I know, for instance, I'm a carer. I'm heading towards that age range now where I may retire sometime in the future, which I'll be deemed within that 55 to 65 age group, you know, have health issues. There's all of that goes on with individual people, but it's how we then take forward the policy on that. So if we know, for instance, of the over 55s, of that percentage of people, those ones don't want to work because they've got their pensions. These guys would kill to work. They would love to work. So we concentrate on them and put our policies. The other just a comment I would make is for years in Northern Ireland we have looked at our labour market purely on an equality basis. I actually would love us to look at it on that Section 75 basis, you know, all the categories, and proactively push for each of the, what are we doing to proactively help each category into employment. But it's just that overlapping issue. How much drill down is there?
I think you're asking very key questions that we definitely need to think about for future work. And I suppose there's two ways to maybe look at this. One would be this question of, excuse me, the people who say that they want to work when asked, and there is data there that has a percentage for each of these four broad categories that says they would like to work but are currently fall within this classification of economically inactive. So that kind of opens the question of, for policymakers, do you concentrate on those people? They're closer to the labour market. You could say that they are in a sense unemployed, so are closer to the labour market. So there's a focus there. If that's your focus, just to get the employment rate up, there's the kind of people to focus on, and you can maybe drill down into the demographics, particularly for over 55s. But then there's also the the policy perspective of, for the people who are further away from the labour market, whose lives would be transformed by maybe part-time work, their mental health would be transformed by the opportunity to work. But those people with maybe overlaying multiple health challenges, they're further away from the labour market. They're difficult to reach. It's more expensive for state intervention. But you know, there might be public health savings there. So there's different incentives. You know, if you think about it in terms of people closer to the labour market or people further away. But within that question, I think you've really hit on some key points about the complexity, particularly for people who are nearing the age of retirement. You know, what's really going on within those people's lives, and what's realistic for them, and what's real, you know, and what do they want in the medium to longer term. So those are key questions to consider.
Thank you. I'm just going to indulge the Deputy Chair with a very quick question.
Just a final one. Is there any barriers to access to data that you would love to have from an administrative data point of view? Because I'm thinking we've all kind of mentioned about drilling down. So is there any barriers that you would perceive?
I think there is more. The data that we looked at in relation to mental health That's relating to the benefit system in a way that doesn't directly cross over into economic inactivity. So I think there is more data out there that we could look at that would be more instructive about mental health. And I think that is going to be part of the conversation with a developing mental health strategy, of more of an understanding of, in particular, this issue for younger people around, we can see within the benefits system that the classification of why people are in receipt of incapacity-related benefits for mental health. There's been a real increase in people related to depression, anxiety, and those kind of figures. But we certainly would like more detail on that and how that relates to employment. And some of that is just work that we have to do, but I think some of it could be the presentation of data that might be out there. Another thing I'll briefly say is that we've had a UK focus, but we do know that there is work ongoing, doing a kind of comparative work, more comparative analysis between North and South, because there are interesting distinctions between the picture in the North and in the South, and there are lessons to be learned, I think, in both directions in that regard. And I think there is going to be better data available on that shortly.
So that's Dr. Anne Devlin's work, isn't it, at the Economic and Social Research Institute? So she's another person who would be worth getting in front of the committee, I would say. Just if I may, a couple of things on that question. I think generally, as data go, the labour force survey data is good, but it's very, I suppose it's quite rigid in its definitions of it puts people into inactive because of caring or inactive because of health and disability. So the more interesting things that we've been talking about this morning is the interactions between those different factors, which you're probably talking about more qualitative research rather than just looking at the published data. The other thing which I think is really very, very important in Northern Ireland at the minute is, we're seeing our working age population becoming less healthy and more disabled. That's in the chart. So, there's an enormous policy questions there about what are we doing to respond to that. But what there's no evidence yet, there's no analysis yet that's looked at how is that connected to the state of our health service. And it would be very powerful if we were able to do a piece of work which looked at how our health waiting lists impacting on the population's health and the population's ability to work, and shows you there's a whole lot of different areas of policy and delivery involved in that, but surely it's inevitable that people leaving work and giving the reason being poor health or people being unable to work because of poor health must be connected to the fact that people aren't getting timely treatment, unfortunately.
Thank you. Anne Morris.
You'll be pleased to know I have most of my questions scored out. But there's one in particular, and it's along you already touched upon it, is the inactivity around the North Coast. And what's the correlation between the inactivity in the North Coast and the lack of employment opportunity? Because in the North Coast, the two main areas of employment are the Causeway Hospital and the Ulster University. Both under threat from centralisation. 80% of the student population is based in Belfast, so between Magee and Coleraine, they've not much left. And also there's a trend under Bengoa to try and centralise health services in and around the greater Belfast area. Again, a threat to the Causeway. And none of that seems to have been taken into consideration by the wider executive, who through various departments would promote X, Y or Z without taking a holistic view of the outcomes of what they wish to achieve, either in education or in healthcare. And considering that the North Coast, it's my area, I know it well, but as I look at this map here, I see that other areas suffer from the same disadvantage as the North Coast. So what can you do to drill down a bit deeper into the inactivity correlating with the lack of opportunity?
Very important questions. Remember, I think the first answer to that would be in relation to the demographics of the area. So there is, I think, within the North Coast, there's an age profile issue there is part of the explanation, not the whole explanation. The other part of that answer is to do with this question of the local jobs market and the availability of jobs in the area. So this goes back to this question of the labour market and the opportunity that's available outside of Greater Belfast. And I know this is a broader question for the executive in terms of the agenda of the economy department and others to spread opportunity beyond Greater Belfast. So I suppose it's a relationship between the specific character of the area, this broader question about regional imbalances, and then also looking at these socio-economic indicators that clearly do relate to economic inactivity. So just to underline them, that people with a lower level of education are perhaps unsurprisingly much more likely to be economically inactive in the long term, and that areas with higher rates of deprivation and etc. are clearly more likely to have higher rates of inactivity. So it's kind of a blend of all those issues. But the availability of jobs in the local jobs market is obviously absolutely fundamental to these questions.
It is something the executive need to look at, and their programme for government is how they expand opportunities to the regions as well as Belfast. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. And there's a couple of things, and time actually has beaten us, but there is actually a lot of value in that, I have to say. The issue around carers does worry me as well, because it totally goes against the anecdotal evidence that I'm sure every elected rep here. Yeah. And what I fear may be the case is that people are not able to afford to leave jobs, and that the caring role is suffering, or they're trying to juggle things. And that is itself leading to pressures on the health system in terms of an impact of physical and mental health. So I suspect there's a tale to be told there in that, and I think we should keep a close eye on it. The other thing I suppose to say is, and it hasn't been mentioned yet, but it is true to say that we are a society emerging from conflict, and there is a transgenerational impact to that is also feeding into this. I do want to acknowledge, just we don't have a lot of time for, but I do want to acknowledge the fact in terms of the other report, you have two reports in front of us today, and you have picked up on the issue around the devastating and disastrous impact of only being able to build 400 homes, and that's going to also be something. And linked to that then, in terms of the major planning issues and the applications and social housing completions, and the very, very extensive challenges there are there across a range of issues. But just in brief, maybe, could you indicate, is there a particular area there that you think the committee would be able to have the most impact in relation to some of those issues in that report?
I suppose just thinking about that report we published last week, and also about the programme for government, the draft programme for government that's just emerged, I think from the committee's point of view, it's really pleasing, and from the department's point of view, it's very pleasing to see the housing included as a priority. But I think my comment on the whole of the programme for government at the minute, the draft, is that there's a lot of ambition, and that's obviously good because there's big problems to be addressed. For example, access to social housing, but it's not clear to me how that is going to be delivered with the current funding and current plans. So it's good to have that priority of affordable, sustainable social housing accessible to all. But what's actually underneath that's going to result in it being delivered, that's the problem, I think. And I think another thing I would highlight there, which isn't, well, it's not directly for this committee, but it struck me reading through that draft programme for government that the constraint that wastewater infrastructure is on housing development across the board is enormous. My understanding is that it's ground to a halt in a lot of areas. So if the ambition on social housing is going to be delivered, then that needs to be addressed somehow. And I thought the programme for government, as it is at the minute in the draft, is quite quiet on that. It mentions it a couple of times, but it's not drawn out explicitly.
Yeah, I think in the context of First and Deputy First Minister and the Finance Minister being in London today, that is a really crucial element of that. So listen, thanks for that. One final point I want just back to the earlier stuff that we were addressing is the whole issue that has been highlighted by the Commissioner for Older People on the age and demographic is going to play into all of this. argument as well. So it's almost a double whammy in that sense.
Yes,
You're trying to improve a situation
Yeah.
where there are very strong headwinds in terms of the demographics of the aging profile of the population.
And more people living with disabilities and illness for longer periods of time, and how do we support them in that situation, ideally to remain in work if that is suitable for them.
Potentially more caring needed in that
Yeah.
line as well.
Yeah.
Okay, well listen, a very, very useful session, great information, and thank you for your engagement with the committee this morning. And
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
Thanks for seeing. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Members, we're going to take a really, really quick wee comfort break here, just if we maybe could be back at 10 past there, and if I could ask us to be taken out of public session for that brief time.
Committee Room 29. Sound. 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 Committee Room 29, 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 Sound.
Members will go ahead and request open again.
All the different pensions.
There is no leave for MLAs for
No,
committee. We're just
it
doing
could be well
plenary.
off. Post.
Oh, I know.
Committee.
That's what I see.
Okay, members, that's us back in live session. Thank you. So, members, we're moving now on to agenda item 7, which is an SL1. And this is the Electrical Safety Standards for Private Tenancies Regulations NI 2024, contained there at page 959 of your pack. So the purpose of this proposed order is to introduce the requirement for private rented landlords to have the hardwired electrical installation of a rental property inspected and tested by a qualified electrician at intervals of not less than a 5-year period. Do members have any comments, or are they content for the department to proceed to make that rule? Go ahead, Kelly.
I could just ask a question. I know that the guidance will be updated to look at this. I'm very interested just to know if the guidance will include definition of what the standard of electrician will be, and a copy of the format that the electrician will use for those homes.
Yeah, can we check? I just said qualified, so
It doesn't interfere with the SL1, but it's the guidance part. It would be useful for us to have sight of that.
thank you, Kelly. Thank you. Members, otherwise, then content for the department to make the rule?
Yep.
Thank you. Agenda item 8 then is another SL1, the Social Security Genuine and Sufficient Link to the UK Amendment Regulations NI 2024, contained in the packet page 1030. The purpose of this proposed rule, members, is to make amendments to disability and carer benefits regulations to amend provisions related to the genuine and sufficient link known as the GSL test. The proposed amendments will update the legislation in line with the Court of Appeal decision in Kavanagh and Anner versus the Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, and it will align that with operational guidance. So do members have any comments? Are they content for the department to make the rule? Content. Thank you, members. Agenda item 9 then, SL1, Social Fund Winter Fuel Payment Regulations NI 2024 on page 1038. So, members, given the topic and the short time frames associated with this, we are going to receive a departmental briefing on this proposed rule. So I now would like to welcome the following officials to our meeting. So Mr. David Tarr, David, very welcome once again, and Mr. John Noble, DFC as well. David, when you're settled in there, could I invite you to make a brief opening statement, and then we'll move to members' questions, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members, for officials to brief you this morning on the Social Fund Winter Fuel Payment Regulations Northern Ireland 2024. I'm the Director of Social Security Policy and Legislation, and I'm joined by my colleague John Noble, who has policy lead responsibility for Social Fund, including obviously winter fuel payment schemes. So, as the committee will be aware, Northern Ireland operates the principle of parity with respect to social security benefits, as reflected in Section 87 of the Northern Ireland Act 1998. And this generally means that social security benefits are paid at the same rates and with the same conditions of entitlement across the UK. Any deviation from the principle of parity that results in additional expenditure in Northern Ireland must normally be met from the Northern Ireland Block Grant. Just a wee bit of background on the winter fuel payment and the changes, and obviously I know there's been quite a bit of publicity and Minister has made some statements and announcements on this, but I'll just go through some background where we are. Currently, the winter fuel payment is a non-means tested benefit, and it is an annual payment ranging from £100 to £300. It is paid to everyone who, by the time of the qualifying week, which is the week beginning on and including the third Monday in September each year, which for this year is begins next Monday, I believe, and they've attained the qualifying age for state pension, which is currently 66, and that's due to raise to 67 in 2026. As the committee will be aware, on the 29th of July this year, the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rachel Reeves, announced that from winter 2024-25 onwards, only those receiving pension credit or other means-tested benefits would continue to receive the annual winter fuel payment in England and Wales. Unfortunately, the Department did not receive any advance notice of the Chancellor's statement was forthcoming or of the impending policy changes to the winter fuel payment scheme. The Department only became aware of the policy changes for England and Wales on the 29th of July, on the same day the Chancellor's statement was being presented to Parliament. The committee may wish to note the cost implications of Northern Ireland not maintaining parity, with proposed changes to the winter fuel payment scheme for England and Wales for this winter is estimated at £44.3 million. There will be additional costs, or there would be additional costs for IT and staffing if a universal payment was to be maintained. Due to the significant impact of the Chancellor's announcement, a paper on the winter fuel payment changes was shared with executive ministers. A request was also made to the First Minister and the Deputy First Minister asking for an urgent decision on whether to maintain parity with England and Wales on the proposed changes. Officials from the Department for Work and Pensions subsequently advised DFC officials that a decision from the Department on maintaining parity in winter fuel payments was required by Friday the 30th of August. The First Minister and Deputy First Minister reluctantly agreed on the 30th of August to maintain parity with England and Wales on this policy change to the winter fuel payment scheme due to the financial constraints for the Northern Ireland Executive. The Executive also wrote to the Prime Minister registering their concern on the matter. Committee may wish to note the Minister has asked Executive colleagues that barring consequentials for cost of living support for this winter are ring-fenced. This would help the Department do whatever we can to ameliorate the consequences of the UK Government's decision, and Minister has agreed to keep the Assembly informed about how we can best help in this regard. And briefly on the SR itself, the Social Fund Winter Fuel Payment Regulations Northern Ireland 2024 redefine the eligibility for pensioners who can receive a winter fuel payment. From winter 2024-25, the payment will no longer be paid on a universal basis. Instead, it will be targeted at those pensioners receiving an income-related benefit such as pension credits. The 2024 regulations implement the Executive's decision to maintain parity with England, Wales and Scotland, who made a corresponding announcement, by changing the entitlement conditions for a winter fuel payment. As a result of the proposed changes, the Department have brought forward the Social Fund Winter Fuel Payment Regulations Northern Ireland 2024. We're obviously happy to take any questions the committee might have, or we can also provide a more detailed summary of the SR, if that would be helpful.
Yes, to the Chair. I actually have declared an interest in this particular topic as well as a receiver of the winter fuel payment.
Okay, thank you, Melissa. I noted. So I suppose this is an issue of huge concern. I know it's shared widely. Really devastating impact in terms of the impact it could have on people, particularly people very close to the threshold, the timing of it, and I have to say, very disappointing to see the incoming government continuing down this line of austerity, which has proved so damaging to so many people. I do understand, the impact of parity given the budgetary situation and the position that the Department and the Minister are in relation to that. But I do think it's incumbent upon the Minister, indeed, and all of us, to ensure that we do whatever we can to mitigate the negative impact of it. I know that we have previously here in today's meeting referred to the anti-poverty strategy and the fuel poverty strategy. Those now become ever more urgent, I have to say. So I suppose that is the context within which we're dealing with that. But for now, I'll go to members then for questions. So I'm going to Andy first, and then Melissa. No, so Andy for a question.
Thanks, Chair, and I would echo the Chair's comments without restating them. Obviously, we're under time constraints. But in terms of question, can I ask, has the Department any viewpoint on the current threshold on pension credit, how effective that is in terms of providing the level of income for those most vulnerable in our society?
So I don't think we would necessarily, as officials, have a viewpoint on the threshold. I know that the letter that went from the First and Deputy First Minister to the Prime Minister outlined the concerns, I would say, with the threshold and asked for that to be reviewed. I don't want to constantly hark back to parity, but of course the thresholds that are there are set by the UK government and we implement those. I am not aware of the Department having taken any specific research about whether those are meaningful levels or anything like that, and I don't think I would be in a position as an official to comment on how appropriate they are.
Okay, and maybe is that a piece of work that the Department can take forward in terms of analysing that if the government continue to push this policy?
I can certainly take that back and speak to our departmental analysts, certainly. Yeah.
And then just final point, Chair, in terms of, and I know the Minister touched on some of the campaign around encouraging pensioners to avail of pension credit, and there are analysis of the numbers who aren't currently claiming pension credit that are entitled, and often we hear about those who are hard to reach in our society. What the Department intend to do to reach those who are most hard to reach, who may not be traditionally connected to social media and those other platforms that we would tend to use to reach people?
So, I mean, obviously, I'm sure you're aware, and so the committee will be aware, obviously, the Make a Call campaign, and the Department does a lot of promotional activity around that and around pension credit in particular. There is, I understand, a new advertising campaign due to commence on the 7th of October, and that will reach out across a number of platforms, including TV, daily and regional press, as well as social media. In terms of, I mean, we have a very active sort of communications team within the Department who certainly try their best. We engage heavily with the advice sector as well, of course, trying to reach out to people. I can certainly, again, I can take that back and ask for any more specific plans. I am aware of a campaign due to launch in the next couple of weeks.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Andy. Sean?
Thank you. And thank you both very much for coming here today. So, first of all, that communication campaign that starts on the 7th of October is going to be too late for those who are not currently in receipt of pension credit. There would be, my call would be for something to go out this weekend, because it's the third, it's next Monday is the cut-off to be eligible for a winter fuel payment. So to have something starting on the 7th of October is just too late in my opinion. In terms of communication with DWP, has anything been written specifically from the Minister around those caps or limits of eligibility? It would be good to understand if the Minister has had any communication there.
In respect of the thresholds for pension credit,
yes.
For example?
Yeah.
I know the Minister has met with the Secretary of State. He has also met with one of the junior ministers, and you'll have to forgive me, I can't remember exactly which one it was, and I know he has raised concerns about winter fuel payments in both meetings. As far as I'm aware, there has been no written communications to DWP on the thresholds, just the letter, obviously, to the Prime Minister.
Okay, my other main concern is really just around an equality impact assessment. We know obviously that this will have detrimental effect on older people, but there is significant evidence that this would disproportionately impact women. We've heard earlier on today about a pension gap with women, and I think that the fact that this is a potentially really harmful policy, that a full equality impact assessment hasn't been, as far as I'm aware, undertaken, or any kind of exploration of the alternative policies or mitigating measures to protect those against those potentially adverse impacts. That would be my big fear here, is that, and obviously I know that is without, it's not the direct result of actions by the minister. This is as an impact from a decision made outside of our control. But is there any kind of, was there any discussion around an EQIA in terms of the potential adverse impacts, particularly around that pension gap on women?
Yes, we've actually done some obviously preliminary analysis while looking at the equality impact assessment. It looks as though we will have to do a full equality impact assessment. Obviously we're beginning work on that, and obviously it'll be the department to try and look at mitigations within that impact for anything that is arisen during that work. So yeah, we will have to do a full equality impact assessment on this.
When do you foresee that taking place?
We'll obviously be working on it as soon as we can. Obviously we've been trying to get the legislation through, obviously keeping to the timeline with DWP, but we have obviously done some preliminary work on it, so we now have to move to do the full one. So I would hope that work will be over the next couple of weeks. Can I just also add a comment? You talked about the application for pension credit and the communications campaign. People making applications to pension credit can actually apply for a backdated date by 3 months. So sort of the cut-off point would be potentially the 21st of December. So if they apply before the 21st of December, they can apply for 3 months, which would bring them back to the qualifying week. So just to clarify that for you.
Useful. Thank you.
Thank you, Sean. And Ciara?
I was just on that with regards to the campaign and those that could apply. Is there anything that the UK, British government are actually doing to try and encourage pensioners who may be entitled outside of a social media campaign or whatever? Is there any targeted additional kind of support? You know, if they have an administrative database, or is there...
I think in some of the sort of papers we've seen, there is actually plans to have a national communications plan, but we haven't seen the detail of that, and we will follow that up. But we can come back to committee on that when we get the details of that. But I had seen there's a reference to a national campaign and how that would actually happen. Just obviously go back and we talked about Make the Call. You know, our Make the Call team obviously would have a lot of outreach with different organisations. So certainly, obviously, and I think the Minister the other day gave a commitment to ramp up some of the sort of the promotional campaign of that. So we will be talking to our colleagues in that team to see if there's anything else that we can do.
Thank you. Maurice?
Thank you very much, Chair. That's just a point of clarification. Anyone over the age of 80 that automatically receive this fuel payment but do not receive pension credit, do they still automatically qualify?
No, unless they're getting pension credit, they wouldn't qualify under the new rules.
Thank you, Maurice. And Kelly?
Thank you very much. Can I just clarify, you've said that people can ask for a back date. Is that included on the pension credit application form, or how do they do that?
I would need to check it in terms of the application form, but I would assume it would be, but they can make a request. But we can check for clarification on the application form.
That would be really helpful. My question is just very specifically on 4.1A5, where it discusses that if during the qualifying week the person is in residential care, and I just want to clarify this. We have horrendous waiting times at the moment for domiciliary care services. So if someone has fallen, for instance, and has broken a hip or a leg or whatever, it's likely to be that they will be in some form of an interim placement in residential care for at least 3 months until their domiciliary care package is in place. Can I just check to make sure? So that means if somebody, they're not in residential care, they've been placed there because the domiciliary care package isn't in place, does that mean then that that person will not qualify even though they're expected to go home anytime really? Does that mean that they won't qualify, or is residential care a different definition of what I'm thinking of?
There is actually can we come back and clarification on that?
There's a definition of
I think there is a
nursing home.
definition of residential care.
I think on a little reading of it, Kelly, that's how we would read it, but we just need to check what the definition is, which
It's
may
just
be in the permanent legislation.
It threw me further down in the regulation under 4.3, where there's a definition of nursing home, and it's just for clarification, because we do know that there are a number of older people who, unfortunately, because the domiciliary care packages are so hard to get, have that interim place before they're able to get back home. Others would love to be back home, but it's just to clarify that, if you could, yes, please.
Yeah, we'll take clarification, because it does actually go on and define residential care, but it talks about temporary, but the regulation says 12 weeks, so we'll clarify that for you.
Please, yes.
Andy,
just a quick follow-up to the backdated payment point, and whether somebody has to ask for that and whether that's highlighted on the form. Would it not be a prudent course of action from the department to automatically look at everybody in this circumstance as to whether a backdated payment would be applicable in their circumstances?
I think we would need to consider. I understand the point on it, and I think we would need to consider that. I mean, my understanding with most benefit claims is you just simply put down the date that you wish to claim from. So if somebody is looking to claim, if they're making a claim, for example, in November, and they wish to claim from today, they should enter that date of claim on the claim form, and we would look at it. That's the normal process, but we obviously will need to specifically look at the pension credit form. But if there is some promotion we can do around that, certainly the department will look at that. I don't know that we can necessarily automatically backdate, but I don't process pension credit claims, and I would have to again, I can't give you a definite position on that. I would need to go and confirm.
I suppose I'm not suggesting automatically backdate, but what I'm saying is the department be more proactive in that.
I think we can certainly. Sorry for cutting across you.
They do that deep dive. Whoever is engaging with the person at the time, they say, what was your circumstance at 3 months ago, and then they analyse as to whether the eligibility criteria was met.
Certainly an option we can explore with the operational team. Certainly, yeah.
Sure.
Sorry, Chair, just a very quick one. Obviously, an issue that's come into my office this week has been the old state pension versus the new state pension. Will there be anything, because if you're on the old state pension, there's an issue there about obviously getting pension credit. Is there anything there that can be done in terms of those who are on the old state pension?
Yeah.
I would say if they're on the old state pension, then they would be eligible. But we'll seek clarification for that. But that would be my understanding.
Not receiving pension credit. If pension credit is the qualifying.
Oh yes, sorry. If they're not. Oh sorry. Yes, if they're not getting pension credit, then obviously yes, they wouldn't probably be eligible. They would obviously need to make a claim for the pension credit if they were on the old state pension. Sorry, I misunderstood the question. Sorry, apologies. Yeah, they would need to make the application for pension credit to get that to make them eligible, because it's not. It's the pension credit that makes them eligible under the new scheme.
Thank you. And I note in the correspondence that it indicates that without committee's agreement, no one will receive the fewer payment, and there's obviously a pressure to that. But has the department undertaken, and I touched on it at the start, has the department undertaken any work to understand the amount of people or the impact on those people just on the cusp of payment, or indeed what it might cost to address or support those people?
I mean, we have the numbers of people who we estimate will be eligible for winter fuel payment, and therefore the number that we estimate under the new policy wouldn't be eligible. But in terms of the individual impact on those people, be it through not being able to afford fuel, whether they would potentially regrettably end up in hospital or anything like that, the department hasn't done anything. Our focus has been on trying to obviously get the legislation through, or prepared obviously to go through, and we have been working with Minister on obviously we're exploring policy options for if there is funding available for any sort of mitigation. So I have John leads a very small team who is also responsible for child maintenance. So the department just has, its focus has been until now trying to make sure we maintain parity and looking at what other options we can present to Minister. The impact, and we're not obviously dismissing that, but it's trying to prioritise obviously what the department, the officials can do who are working on this at that time.
Okay, Brian, go ahead.
Just to make one brief point. I know generally we've all talked about pension credit, being the eligible benefit, but I think there's 5, isn't that right?
Yes.
I'm sure you'll advertise that.
Yes. So it is.
When we're talking about pension credit, there's actually, just so I think we're all are aware of that, but there's actually 5 that are set out. Yeah.
Yes, so it's any income-based benefit. Pension credit will be for, I think, for the obvious reasons, the main qualifying benefit, but it will include income support, income-based Job Seekers Allowance, Employment Support Allowance, Universal Credit, and I believe the amendment has been made for people who are receiving an amount of working tax credits or child tax credits. Mm-hmm. That was an amendment made by DWP, but it's in our original draft of the regulations. So yes, you're quite correct, yes. And that's what we have tried to, obviously some of the communications does refer quite heavily to pension credit, and we're also referring just to income-based benefits. I appreciate it's a very catch-all term, but we would trust, we will scan, the department will identify those people anyway, and anybody who is not on a claim and is looking to make a claim, it will almost certainly be pension credit they would be claiming now to give them their eligibility, because clearly new claims to most of those other benefits have now closed with the exception of universal credit.
Okay, thank you, members. Yeah, members are all content. So listen, thank you for the briefing, David and John, and appreciate your attendance at committee this morning. Thank you. Okay, members. So any follow-up actions, members, in relation to that, or go ahead, Andy?
I would be keen that we would also, as a committee, write to DWP and set out our views on this, and also perhaps also articulate that obviously a change of course, which doesn't appear to be coming given current events, but that we would like to see an increase in the pension credit threshold as well, if colleagues are in agreement.
Members content? Yeah. Okay, thank you, members. So following that briefing session then, members, can I ask if you're content for the department to proceed to make the rule? Content, yep, thank you. Okay, moving on then to agenda item 10, which is SL1, Draft Local Government Pension Scheme Amendment Regulations NI 2024, which are contained at page 1052. We will be receiving a departmental briefing on this proposal, which was received during recess and in relation to which the rule has also been laid. So I welcome the following officials to the meeting, Julie Broadway and Willie Dobbin. So Julie, once you're settled in there, could I ask you to go ahead, or either yourself or Willie, with an opening statement, and then we'll get the members' questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to speak to you about the Local Government Pension Scheme Amendment Regulations 2024. And first, can I apologise that the timing of these regulations has not given the committee time to consider the regulations before they came into operation, before they were made and came into operation. But can I assure the committee that the regulations will not disadvantage any members of the local government pension scheme? If the committee is content, I'll briefly run through the background to the regulations. Under Regulation 99 of the Local Government Pension Scheme Regulations Northern Ireland 2014, the pension scheme manager, NILGOSC, must issue an annual benefit statement for all active, deferred and pension credit members by the 31st of August each year. The annual benefit statement provides an estimate of the pension benefits a member's built up in the scheme as at 31st of March each year, and it may also provide a projection of the pension that a member could have if that member continues to work until normal pension age. As the committee may recall, the Local Government Pension Scheme Amendment Number 2 Regulations 2023, from now on I'll just call them the MacLeod Regulations to keep it short, which came into operation in October 2023, introduced the MacLeod remedy for the Local Government Pension Scheme. And the purpose of the 2023 regulations was to address discrimination found in the MacLeod case, where it was found that protections provided to older members of public service pension schemes actually created unlawful discrimination for younger members of the scheme. So the Public Service Pensions and Judicial Offices Act 2022 and the MacLeod regulations both require details of the MacLeod remedy to be included in annual benefit statements from 2023-24 year onwards. But there are significant steps needed on the part of pension scheme managers to implement the MacLeod remedy. It has involved them having to change their computer systems to accurately update members' records arising from the implementation of MacLeod. And for NILGOSC, this has included the collection and testing of data from 169 employers, updates needed to systems and amendments to 118,000 individual records. So it's no small task for them to be implementing the MacLeod remedy. All of these steps would need to be undertaken before an annual benefit statement could include details of the MacLeod calculations. So despite NILGOSC's best efforts in taking forward this complex and detailed work, It has acknowledged that it is not able to include details of the McLeod calculations in 2023-24 annual benefits statements, and possibly, depending on how the implementation goes, for some categories of members for next year also. And local government pension schemes in other jurisdictions are in exactly the same position. This issue was first raised by DLOC with us in late April, where they had mentioned that some of the pension scheme managers in England and Wales had raised the issue that they would not be able to include details in annual benefit statements. And in mid-May, then Nilgosk confirmed that they were in the same position, that they wouldn't be able to include that information. Then, of course, with the difficulty with the general election being called, so there was a question of whether we could proceed or not on legislation. And DLOC then, it was would have been June before it was decided then that they, given the nature of the local government pension scheme, they would press ahead with legislation. Were scheme managers unable to comply with the regulations, they have a duty to report a breach of the regulations to the pension regulator, and unless a regulatory change was made before the 31st of August of this year, it would have meant that Nilgosk would have had to refer themselves to the pensions regulator. So to ensure that changes to annual benefit statements do not detract from the other complex work of implementing the McLeod remedy, it was decided to set aside the requirements for annual benefit statements to include the McLeod calculations for this year, and with the potential of also some categories, not including them for next year as well. And given the technical nature of the proposals and the very tight time constraints, the Minister agreed to a short targeted consultation on proposals to disapply the relevant provisions which actually stated that annual benefit statements had to include McLeod calculations. The consultation closed on the 2nd of August, and we received 2 responses, both of which were supportive of the proposals. Regulations were made on the 28th of August and came into operation on the 31st of August. And the equivalent regulations for the pension schemes in England and Wales, they were made on the 27th of August, so just the day before ours. So the regulations disapply the relevant legislative provisions which require details of the McLeod remedy to be included in annual benefit statements for 23-24 and introduce a discretion to permit the scheme manager to disapply those provisions for 24-25 for a member or group of members. They also include a minor amendment to correct an earlier drafting error. This was to correct the reference to a paragraph number in the Local Government Pension Scheme Regulations Northern Ireland 2014. And just finally, as briefly as I mentioned before, the regulations will not disadvantage members of the Local Government Pension Scheme. In the period to the 31st of August, Nilgosk have actually issued around 76,000 annual benefit statements. If details of the McLeod remedy had to have been included on those benefit statements, it would have meant that they would have had to do 76,000 manual calculations of the McLeod remedy, and that would have actually taken away from them doing the normal implementation work for the McLeod remedy. But Nilgosk have confirmed that they will provide any members who require details of the McLeod remedy on request to them. So, for example, if someone is making plans to retire or wants details of what McLeod would be included, Nilgosk will carry out that calculation for them. So it will save up on the administrative work needed by Nilgosk to implement the McLeod remedy. And again, I regret that the work in bringing forward these regulations all had to be done during the Assembly recess period, but the legislation had to be in place by the 31st of August, otherwise Nilgosk would have had to report themselves to the pension regulator.
Okay, thank you, Julie, for that. And I suppose I must start out by saying that is absolutely a challenge to the committee is seeking to apply its scrutiny role, and the earlier sessions have demonstrated we require time to do that. You have set out something of a timeline there. I'm not sure about the recess period of the impact of that, but you'd said that by June the general election was out of the way and we're into August. Was there any avoidable delay within that period of time, because that has led to a situation now where we're having to look at an SL1 and the SR?
No, there wasn't. This was, I think it was June that England and Wales went out for their consultation. We actually there was a period of time we needed to get legal advice because Nilgosk and other pensions managers had raised issues about whether we had caught all of the provisions that needed to be updated and removed. And so there was a period of several weeks there where we were back and forward getting legal advice to just ensure that what we were introducing was covering, everything that needed to be set aside.
Okay, and in relation to the rule itself then, would there be any impact to members of the scheme if the committee deferred the decision for 1 week until the examiner has reported on the rule?
The legislation has already come into operation. I mean, I don't think there would be any effect on members of the scheme, because the committee would then be making a decision on taking into account the examiner's opinion on it, on whether you wanted to agree it or possibly vote for them to be, annulled, I assume.
Okay, well, I do want to make very clear the point that committee is required to do a scrutiny role, and committee need time to do that, and this committee want to be in that position. So if you need to reflect, or the department needs to reflect that back to some other agency in terms of the process, I think that needs to be run in the strongest possible terms.
Absolutely, and we can understand that, and it's not something that we take lightly, and it's something which we always try to ensure that we give the proper time for scrutiny.
Okay, I'll go to members, then I'm going to Brian, then Ciara, Sean and Kelly.
Just briefly, are you confident that no one will lose out financially, even though the statements might have been wrong this year in terms of the McLeod remedy not being applied, but financially people will get the right money?
Absolutely.
Even if they
Yes.
retired now? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Because the annual benefit statements are giving people a projection of what, if they retired, they would receive, a projection of the benefits. But if someone actually applies, to retire, Nilgosk will carry out a full calculation of, including in relation to the McLeod remedy, of what benefits that person will get. So yes.
Nobody will lose out?
Nobody will lose out.
Okay.
Thank you, Brian. And actually, Ciara and then Kelly I'm going to, so Ciara.
I suppose I have a bit of a possible concern regarding the flexibility and the delay. So you mentioned, obviously, there's kind of discretion for delay for specific categories.
Yes.
I'm under the assumption that an IT is one of the main issues, to be able to provide the statements, etc., an update from the McLeod remedy. So I can't understand why there would be a potential further delay for specific categories if it's an IT system. Could you clarify that for us?
I think it's just something which it just has to provide a discretion, just in case there are particular types of, maybe deferred pension members. It wasn't possible to get all of those calculations done for next year. We're hoping that we won't be in that position. Willie, is there anything further on that?
Any further just guidance as to this
we're
discretion
working
for pension managers for these specific categories?
We consulted on that, and we didn't receive any feedback suggesting that guidance was required. So the discretion will rest with Nilgosk, and it really depends on how much progress Nilgosk make in implementing them, getting the work done on implementing the McLeod remedy in time for those benefit statements next year. So the purpose of getting these regulations in place was to save Nilgosk the administrative task of providing the McLeod details in, well, they weren't in a position to provide the McLeod details. So these regulations save Nilgas from having to self-refer and themselves to the pensions regulator for a breach of the regulations, and therefore that the additional time and administrative effort that this saves can go towards implementing fully the McLeod remedy. The problem is with the software that's required to carry out the calculations for the McLeod remedy. It's not yet in place within NILGOSC.
And that's why we're giving them, the discretion that, if they were able to introduce the McLeod details for most cases, but there were, because of the computer system, there were certain categories of people where it might not be possible to do that next year. It just allows the discretion without us having to make another piece of legislation. But as I say, hopefully we won't be in that position. They're working towards having all of the implementation done for next year, but it will just give the discretion so that we don't find ourselves in the same position this year.
The discretion, and has that got a deadline of 26? 25, 26?
It's the deadline for that. That will only cover annual benefit statements for the 24-25 year. And again, those benefit statements have to be out by the 31st of August every year. So they have to be out by the 31st of August 25.
Okay, Ciara, so I'm going then to Kelly.
Well, I was wanted to ask the clarification then that this discretion, obviously it's longer than we hope we need.
Yes.
But I'm just making sure that the discretion won't run forward into the time when the pensions dashboard should be coming forward, because anybody who's on that pension, maybe others, would be looking for their information on that. The only concern I have is the presumption that people know to ask about McLeod. Is there anything that has been discussed with NILGOSC that they will ensure that McLeod option is available for people? Because you think about the range of people who have access to this pension. It goes everything from councillors to administrative people, chief executives, gardeners. It's a huge range of people.
Yeah.
It's whether or not they know to ask, because I know that there have been other employers that have not necessarily brought forward McLeod clearly enough. Is there a requirement then for NILGOSC to have to do that?
We can discuss that with NILGOSC and ask them to do that.
Yes. But they will check by default for every single member, yes.
And can I ask, just when I brought up that pensions dashboard, obviously we have a problem now, the calculations need to be done and the computer needs to be updated. Are they working to ensure that they can provide their pension as part of the pensions dashboard when it comes in?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. Ciara, were you looking to raise anything else there?
No, and you clarify this is only up until 24, 25. There's no discretion or guidance to extend.
If it was to be done, it would require another piece of legislation. But I mean, at that stage, we would be hopeful that the McLeod remedy should be fully implemented.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so members content with that then. So I then thank both of yourselves for attending today's briefing. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, members, any follow-up actions in relation to that? So following the session, can I ask for if members are content for the department to proceed to make the rule for the record, let's say. Are members content for the department to make the rule? Yep. So members, we are now going to move into closed session to receive a briefing and advice from the examiner of statutory rules. So I could ask the
Committee Room 29, sound. Committee Room 29, sound. Committee Room 29, sound. Committee Room 29, sound. Committee Room 29. 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 Sound. Committee Room 29, 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 Sound.
That's you live now.
Okay, thank you, members. So moving into agenda item 12, SR 2024-159, the Local Government Pension Scheme Amendment Regulations NI 2024, which are at page 1085. Members, the departmental officials briefed us today on the SL1 earlier in today's meeting, and we indicated we were content with the proposal, so we now need to consider the rule. We have heard from the examiner in relation to the 21-day rule and our scrutiny obligations, which are of huge importance. So I would propose to members that we write to the department outlining the need for this committee to have appropriate time to apply the scrutiny that is essential to these types of rules and regulations. Members content with that?
Agreed.
So moving then to the rule itself, have members any objection to the rule? No. Then can I put the following question: that the Committee for Communities has considered SR 2024/159, the Local Government Pension Scheme Amendment Regulations NI 2024, and has no objection to the rule. Are members agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Agenda item 13, members' correspondence. There's a heavy schedule of correspondence there and some items within it. I would propose, given time and how today has worked out, that we maybe bring the correspondence back to next week's meeting.
Agreed.
Yep. So, okay, we'll take a look at that, members. There may be some invites in there, members, that members need to respond to individually. So just take a look at that in the meantime, because time could be pressing on some of those. So, agenda item 14 then is a forward work programme. So members have been provided with a paper from the clerk in relation to the planning session we held in Dungannon in May. Could I ask everyone to take that memo away for review and consider it? Further, whilst the committee team seek updated information from the department and relevant agencies in relation to the priorities table on page 21 of the table pack, because some of those priorities may have been partially or fully moved on, and I think we will need to consider maybe a review of that. We'll need to create another maybe planning session to review priorities given events and how things have progressed. So a copy of the forward work programme is at page 3583. Do members have any comment or are content to note as outlined there? Yep, thank you. Any other business for today, members? No, thank you. So agenda item 6.
Just was discussed just before we went live to pass on our thanks to Tracy, the former clerk of this committee, now that she's moved on.
Yep. Thank you. And agenda item 16 then is date, time and location of the next meeting. So our next meeting will be at 10 a.m. on Thursday, 19th of September 2024, here in room 29 in Parliament Buildings. Thank you all, members.
My apologies for that.
Committee Room 29. Sound. Committee Room 29. Sound.